Chapter 2:21 Peter into P.O. Layla's anger bubbled within her at such a question. She wanted to shout and ask the same question to him. Why couldn't he do it as well? He could get turned as well. And yet, despite wanting to ask such a question on why he couldn't do the same, she already knew the answer. It was the loss of the ability of Vorden. He was already strong on his own and proved himself a good asset to the team. His skills were versatile and had helped them out several times because of that. While for her, it didn't mean much. Her powers were quite weak, only being a level 2. In fact, she had even bought a level 3 ability book before hoping to improve her powers, but there was no such luck. She was one of the unfortunate souls that even with money weren't able to increase the strength of her ability. She was stuck at level 2, this was her bottleneck. I want a Vorden, but it's too risky right now, she replied. At first, when Layla had met Quinn and had experienced what happened to her, she really did want him to turn her. Growing up, the only form of entertainment she had was books. It was her escape from her time at the Pure base. Day in and out, they would constantly show videos, have classes and training related to their goal. Then when she could finally relax, she took her time reading fantasy stories of the old. Often in the books, it would talk of a vampire sweeping a girl away from all her problems and taking them to a new world, away from everything. After meeting Quinn, this was what had attracted her. But at the same time, she couldn't forget about the reality of why she was at the base in the first place. Her mind kept straying away and reminding her she needed to stick to the cause. So she had planned to inform Pure of her findings, a way to make their members stronger without using abilities. However, as she grew closer to Quinn, she was afraid what would happen to him if she was to reveal to Pure what he was. There was always the chance that Pure wouldn't be okay with it. Sometimes the organization's actions even confused her with how they worked and what they deemed okay. In a way, beast weapons that they used were just like abilities, with those more powerful than others. Did Pure distribute them equally to their followers? Yet they deemed this as okay. Then when she saw what happened with Peter, second thoughts were running through her head. If Layla were to do those things, then she didn't know how she would face her family. She wasn't very close with them, but her mother was all she knew and all she had right now. If I go off the radar, stop reporting to Pure, and choose to be by Quinn's side, they could run an investigation. They might think at first what happened to me was the same as everyone else, but they would quickly find out I was still okay. They would then look into me, send higher-ups, and then Quinn would be in even more trouble. Layla explained, when the time is right, I promise I will be by Quinn's side. Although she had said this, she still wasn't sure herself. When it came between choosing Pure over Quinn right now, she would still choose Pure where her family was and now Aaron as well. After hearing her explanation, it seemed Layla had made a lot of sense. She could be lying about the whole thing, but Vorden didn't really know how Pure worked. Right now, everything was okay, so he wouldn't want to stir the pot anymore. It's not just about Pure, Vorden replied. You're too weak to help, and it seems like you will cause more problems for us in the future than help. At least you might be of some use to us if you're turned. These last words that Vorden had spoken were the biggest hit to Layla. She knew this. Her whole life, she felt like this, even within the Pure organization. She wasn't any help to her mother, she wasn't any help to her friends, and she couldn't even help that much when her friend needed her. Vorden, can I ask? She shouted and focused her thoughts elsewhere. How did you know I was here? This area she was in right now was a place where she and Aaron would often just hang out with the two of them. There were never many students here, so she was surprised Vorden was able to find her. Your roommate told me. Vorden shouted back as he walked away. Romate, yeah. How would she know? I'm surprised she actually paid attention to me and Aaron. She was always just off doing her own thing. Maybe that girl is a sweeter person than she looks. The next day had arrived, and it had now been a couple of days since the whole event with True Dream was over and done with. The school no longer searched for the missing students. After doing a sweep of the school, it looked like none of the students had seen Peter or Aaron. In the end, they deemed that the video that had been sent must have been true, and they were too late. Things were starting to get back to normal. With this, Logan had made preparations for today was the day that the student known as P.O. Blank would return. With the help of Leo, they were able to gain access to the portal room once again. The security surrounding the place wasn't as on high alert now, and being a Sergeant Leo had privileges to use the room as he wished. Sometimes the sergeants would visit other planets to brush up their skills hunting beasts on the portals, or maybe even visit a few family and friends. Leo was able to sneak Peter into the room, and with him, several of Logan's mechanical little spiders. After that, Leo left the room, and it was all down to Peter. "You ready?" Peter said. Everything had been prepared beforehand. The wristwatch had been altered to indicate the pulse of a living person along with a level 4 ability, and Logan had also made a few adjustments in the other rooms that he still hadn't informed the others about. With Logan's ability and the use of his spiders, he didn't personally have to be anywhere to make adjustments. Logan was able to freely control the metallic spiders however he wished. Using his computer, he was also able to monitor and hear everything that was going on in those rooms. If the spiders were ever spotted, they had a certain pattern on them that made them just look like any other spider. From time to time, people would attempt to splatter them, but Logan would try his best to scurry them away before that happened. At the moment, even Peter's clothing had looked roughed up to indicate he was either traveling through the desert or even going from shelter to shelter at the time until he had found his way back. With everything set and done, Logan pressed a key on his keyboard. At the same time, in a different location, in the school security office, a signal was detected. There has been a signal activated from one of the portals. A man said, "Send word to anyone nearby, immediately." It didn't take long for the two guards by the door to enter the portal room and find Pio immediately. Haley soon came along with Faye to check on who had made the signal. The main reason why the generals were called was just in case it was a beast that had managed to enter through the portals. "That's one of the missing students," Faye shouted as soon as she saw Peter. She had recognized him since she had dealt with their case files. She had looked at the 5 students who had supposedly died that day over and over again. "Quick!" Haley takes him to the medical facility. "We need to check that he's all healthy." This is the first bit of good news we have had in quite a while. Right now, inside Logan's room, Quinn and the others were standing over him. And as they heard those words, they all looked at each other in horror. There was no need for her to personally use her ability to heal anything on the outside. She hooked Peter up to a large tube-like machine, while also placing several little of what appeared to be white stickers all over his body. The machine would show his internals and display his insides, as well as see if there was something wrong with any of his organs, including his heart. It further looked into the details of his blood pressure and all sorts of vitals. And everything could be done with the single use of the machine. This was where Logan's ability had come to its advantage. Beforehand, before this all happened, Logan was able to fake a sickness and enter the medical facility. During this time, he had touched each and every machine available there. While doing so, he had taken control of the machines, making them feel alive. He could now give them commands, and they would follow them whenever he wanted to. The others sat there nervously, as Haley would continue to jot down information on her little tablet every now and then. She would look on the screen and then go back to her tablet. "It looks like you're in perfect condition," Haley said as Peter lifted himself out of the machine. "Now I just need to ask you a few questions." Once again, the others listening in on everything were a little worried. But as she asked him questions, Peter had answered everything perfectly. Hearing this, Logan was nodding his head proudly, but the others weren't too sure. The problem was Peter had answered them all too perfectly, answering almost immediately and in a robot-like voice. Haley continued with her questions while a soldier stood by her side, noting down everything. She had even asked about what had happened to him before this point. Logan had come up with a backstory that was plausible according to the situation. It detailed about when the Dalki had attacked their group, he had run away and escaped. The only problem was that all his equipment had been left behind, and he had no clue where he was. He traveled through the desert for numerous days, managing to feed himself using the survival skills the school had taught him, eventually reaching a shelter. The problem was that it was the wrong shelter. The shelter only had teleporters that linked to other planets and none back to Earth or the military base. But he found out the shelter he had come from wasn't too far. He stayed until he regained his strength and purchased a map leading him to the original shelter, and eventually returned back to the military base. Once the questioning was over, Haley left Peter to be with a soldier, guarding him as he rested while she went off to give a report to Nathan. "So, how is the boy?" Nathan asked. "Thankfully, he seems to be in perfect condition health-wise, but—" Haley hesitated. "But what?" Nathan replied. "It seems like his mind isn't all there. Sometimes his response was quite rigid, and there seemed to be a lack of emotion. When checking PO before, he didn't have any of these signs. Although this could be due to the trauma of being attacked by the Dalki. Perhaps he will come around in the future." "That's great news," Nathan said. "As long as the student is fine, it will be okay. We can inform his parents about the good news for now. They don't need to know about the rest until later. There is no use worrying them over nothing if he is to return to normal soon. Have him rejoin classes tomorrow." "But sir," Haley complained, "don't you think it's too soon to send him out again? He has only just come back." "You might be right about that. Inform the student and let him decide. If he wishes to go then, let him." "As you wish, sir," Haley said before returning. As Haley left the room, Nathan went to pick up the files on his desk. As he read through them one by one, he felt like pulling his hair out. He had a stressful few days coming up. His way of thinking would often clash with the military's current way. But this time he thought it was too much. An orange portal outing, just what are they thinking? Nathan said. It seemed like Peter's disguise had worked and they had bought Logan's plan. Quinn didn't quite know how he did it, but he knew it was something only he could do. With the tension now gone, it really did seem like their group finally had no more problems to deal with. There was still the matter with Duke, but now with Peter gone, there was no direction. They would just have to wait for him to make his next move against Vorden and to slip up somewhere. It was late that night, and the others had left the room to go to sleep. Just before they left the room, Fex had spotted something on Logan's workbench. It was the square-shaped portable teleporter. While the others were busy saying their goodbyes and having a friendly chat with each other, Fex decided to move closer to have a look. The workbench wasn't your usual type of workbench. There were several tools designed there just for Logan's use. There were even several computer screens just above the workbench. Right now, it looked like he had the square teleport device hooked up via some cables leading upward to the computer screen. On the screen above was a random list of numbers, spanning long rows and rows of different sequence of numbers. The machine was going through different sequences at an alarming rate, and each time, the number would blink red and go on to the next sequence. He can't be trying to crack the thing, can he? I thought these things were meant to be unbreakable. But Fex wasn't so naive. Perhaps the vampires thought the devices were pretty secure, but after witnessing what Logan was able to do time and time again, he thought maybe there was the chance Logan would be able to crack the code. This is bad, Fex thought. The square, portable teleporters were different from the round ones the Earthlings used. They were a lot more advanced. The circular teleporters were set to go to one destination only, while the square ones worked more like a teleport station. An access code needed to be put in, and depending on which access code was used, it would teleport you to the correct station. This was how Fex was able to arrive on Earth, through a similar type of teleporter. The problem was there being two types of square teleporters, with each slightly different in design. On the top where the code was to be inputted, it could either be green or red. Green meant it was able to be used to travel to any teleport station. This included the ones on other planets, not just Earth. The one inside of Logan's room had a red panel on top. Similar to the circle portals, they had one destination and one destination only. It was back to the place where Fex had come from. He had realized this before, but thought nothing much of it, because without the access code, Logan would never be able to use the teleporter. But looking at the screen, Fex didn't know when, but soon he would have access to the teleporter. Chapter 223, A New Team. As everyone walked off and headed back to their rooms, Fex managed to pull Quinn to the side just before they were about to part ways. After all, Fex and Quinn's rooms were on the opposite ends of the hall. Just a little warning to you, Quinn. The device that Logan had been tinkering around with on his workbench, it's a portal leading back home. If he discovers the access code and where it goes to, you need to do everything you can to stop him. Otherwise, the two of us will be found out, and we will be in big trouble. Finished with what he wanted to say, Fex quickly left Quinn before he could even ask any questions. What was that all about? Quinn murmured. He then decided to think carefully about the words Fex had said. The device on his workbench was the teleportation device that had been created by Richard Eno. Quinn knew of this fact only thanks to the system's inspect skill, and then later had informed Logan. By home, there could only be one place Fex was talking about. It was where the vampires came from, still unsure whether or not that was somewhere on Earth or another planet. But most likely from the hints given out so far, it seems like it's somewhere along the way between when the system's creator was a vampire and the vampires now. They had moved from the Earth and relocated to another planet, or at least a place hidden from a human eye. He understood that if Logan was to figure it out, he needed to stop him. The only thing Quinn didn't understand was why Fex seemed so concerned. If Logan was to travel through the portal, why would he get in trouble? It started to make Quinn think of his first meeting with Fex. He mentioned something along the lines that he wasn't meant to be here. Is that the reason why Fex hadn't acted against Quinn? If he was to be found out then, he would be in trouble as well. And based on what he said just now, he had basically confirmed it. If this was all true then, Quinn didn't need to worry about Fex. If what you were thinking is along those lines, then I'm afraid the situation is worse, the system said. Based on the boy's young age, and at the same time his great skill, it would be wise to assume he holds a high position in one of the vampire families. If he is not here on orders then, they will send others on his trail to retrieve him. We need to be careful. All of this meant one thing. It was another reminder for Quinn to get stronger and be quick in doing so. The next day, the first-year students were called into the assembly hall for a meeting once again. It was a little bit of a surprise, but they assumed it either had something to do with the next portal outing that was to be held this weekend or the interim military base event in a couple of weeks. As Vorden lined up next to Quinn, the two of them looked around the room and eventually spotted Peter. Peter had been asked whether he wanted a break before joining the school again, and they even asked him if he wanted to take part in the next outing. They had expected him to say no, but to their surprise, Peter had insisted to be taken on board, claiming that he wanted to get more experience as soon as possible in order to prevent such a thing happening to him again. The real reason, though, was because Quinn had asked him to. It was important for Quinn to keep Peter as close as possible to him. While Vorden was looking around the room, his eyes had managed to catch the female student CIA. She was standing right by Layla, which was expected since the two of them were roommates. Vorden started thinking back at the girl's strange words, and just then, the two of their eyes met. CIA noticed this and blew over a kiss towards Vorden. Seeing this, Vorden quickly turned away. What is wrong with that girl? No class at all. Nothing like Erin. Vorden quietly complained. You prefer that lame ice girl to her? What is wrong with you? Ratton said. Onto the stage walked Nathan. It was the first time many of the first-year students had seen him. Usually, a general would hardly ever talk to the students unless it was something important which made the students fidget and slightly worry. Okay, I'm not one for speeches, so let's get to the point, Nathan said. The portal outing on the weekend. I'm here to tell you all it won't be like usual. This year, the military has decided to expand their operation and get more aggressive in planetary explorations. Nathan explained. So, what does that mean for you guys? Well, instead of the normal green portal, you guys get to jump ahead and explore an orange portal instead. Hearing the news, the students suddenly broke into gossip. An orange portal this soon? I thought they only did that with the second years. What if we run into high-level beasts? Why would they do this to us, especially after the Dalki attack? Silence. Nathan shouted as he slammed his fist down onto the podium. Nathan rarely got angry, but he knew he had to calm down the crowd before it got out of control. The other factor was he really didn't think this was the right decision. It was too early for them, and they could seriously hurt themselves, but his boss Paul had ordered it, and he had to follow. Worry not, for there will be 2 sergeants sent out with you on this journey. Leo, head of the beast weapon class, and Faye. These are 2 of our strongest generals, so even if you do run into high-level beasts, they should be able to help you. I will now let Faye explain how the portal outing will work for all of you. Faye then took over and walked to the podium. By the time she had arrived, Nathan had already left the hall. He had already done everything he needed to do. An orange portal outing is different from the green portal outing you did before. The green outing is focused on competition between each group, but The orange outings focus on working together. Each class will travel together in groups of 50. The main goal is exploration. Portal planets have yet to be fully explored. Each class will head in a different direction, but we shall remain close to each other. You will remain in your teams of 5, while traveling in the larger group of 50. Each team will be given a certain device that will be used to survey the land and map out the terrain. The data recorded will be used to automatically create a world map and other maps for future use on the planet. More details will be explained once the devices have been given to you. It will also go into depth about how points will be distributed per each team. For those of you who lost members on the last trip and a few new faces, please fill into those groups lacking members. If all teams are filled, please come to me. I will randomly assign you to a group. Please do this now. Faye commanded. The hall of students quickly shifted around with everyone getting into the same groups they were in before. Quinn, Vorden, and Layla remained in one group. Technically, Peter and Aaron had left their group, so there were 2 spaces left vacant. Peter, now known as P.O., had decided to come over to join Quinn's group. This had been the plan all along. So, what do we do about the 5th person? Vorden inquired. As Quinn looked around the room, he noticed once again that Fex was all on his own. During his time at school, he really hadn't spent time with anyone else other than Quinn and the others. And due to the low level indicated on his watch, the other teams that were lacking in people totally avoided eye contact with him. Seeing this, Quinn shouted, "Fex, come join us over here." Chapter 224 in addition. Some of the others thought that what Quinn was trying to do wasn't the right move. They were sure that Fex was hiding something, but at the same time, they weren't surprised. Recently, Quinn and Fex had been hanging out with each other more often, so an occurrence as such was expected. Perhaps this is an instance of keeping your friends close, but your enemies closer, Vorden said as quietly as possible. Right now, he was standing next to Layla. Thus, he had said those words loud enough just for her to hear, even slightly leaning his body towards her ear. As Layla looked up, she could see Vorden staring down at her. After meeting his gaze, she knew that the comment was being directed at her. There was the urge inside her to retaliate and say something back, but after their last conversation, she just felt defeated. All of a sudden, Fex came rushing over towards the others. The group didn't really know what to say. They hadn't really attempted to make much conversation with him because they were afraid they might say something that would give Quinn away. After all, they were aware of the awkward situation he was in, so they would just allow Quinn to deal with it. "I guess you guys realized how lame your group is," Fex said. His tone indicated that he was proud of himself. "So, you immediately needed me to boost it up a level. Well, if you really insist." Upon hearing that, an awkward smile made its way to Quinn's face. He merely wanted to be close to Fex, hoping he could eventually learn more about the vampire world. After what happened on the last portal outing, he became incredibly worried. Although Quinn had gotten stronger, he still wasn't strong enough to deal with the weakest of the Dalki. Also, he couldn't imagine how powerful the vampires, who were coming after Fex, would be. Accordingly, one thing was simple: he needed to get stronger faster. There were only 2 days left before the next portal outing. As he thought about ways to boost his strength, there were a few things that came into his mind. 1. He still hadn't studied with the new tutorial videos that had been unlocked after learning the vampire martial arts. Adding more variety to his attack skills would always come in handy. Another way for Quinn to get stronger was to obtain more skill points. There were several shadow skills he had yet to unlock. However, to get stat points, he needed to level up his current shadow abilities. And the final way to get stronger was to increase his stats. He could either level up, but the amount of EXP required for the next level up would increase significantly. By just playing the game, he wouldn't be able to make a measly dent on it. He could go around challenging random people. Nevertheless, while the others thought he was a level 1 and with the school on alert, that wouldn't be in the list of his best ideas. Still, there was another way that he could utilize to increase his stats and strength. It was entirely unique to him, and that was by obtaining the blood of as many different people as possible. When Quinn saw how useful Feck's charm ability was, he felt like there might be a way for him to quickly do this. However, When he had tried this method on a few students as he passed the halls, it was unsuccessful for the most part. To the few that they were successful on, Quinn could only remove their memory, yet was unable to command them to move. This meant that it wasn't much use unless he could find a student that would fit the criteria of the skill. If he wanted to go through with this plan, he would need more stat points in his charm skill, which just led him back to the original problem. Are there any other ways to get blood? As Quinn thought about this, the image of the city hospital suddenly popped into his head again. Still, he would have a problem with the cameras. For now, he would just have to focus on upgrading his shadow abilities along with learning the tutorial videos. While everyone was huddled up in their groups, there seemed to be 3 stray students that had walked up to the front of the assembly hall, going straight to stand by Faye's side. As she looked into the crowd of people, she started to look at each of the groups. Every single one of them was already filled with 5 people. "You over there," Faye said, pointing to one student and then to the next from another group. "You there and you." She surveyed the room one more time, and her eye had managed to capture Vorton, who was just at the back. Faye had seen his face on documents more times than she would have liked, so she decided to let his group deal with the remaining student. "And you can head to those at the back," she said. The others were too preoccupied with their conversations, busy talking about what they might expect to find in an orange portal planet. Vorton was the one with the most knowledge in the group, and he was saying how it varied from place to place. The orange portal was in the midst of 2 stages. Once the whole planet had been explored, they would use the information that they had gathered to update its status to green or red. Although it was usually a task that would take a few months to accomplish, so it was unlikely they would be able to get much done. Just then, a voice echoed loudly within the hall. "Hello," CIA said as she entered the circle. She then turned her head towards Vorton and started to wave her hand in front of the young man's face. "You," Vorton replied, shocked that he saw CIA. "What are you doing here?" "Look, I'm not interested." "Well, that's a shame, but it looks like you're stuck with me." She proceeded to glance at Layla and gave her a wave too. Meanwhile, Quinn became curious about what was happening, so he decided to inquire. "What do you mean?" "Sergeant Faye has asked me to join your team. You see, the team I was in before, well, it turns out that 3 of them were part of Pure, so the 2 of us had no other groups to go to. That is the reason why Faye told me to go with you guys." This was unexpected and a little bit annoying, Quinn thought, as he prevented his emotion from showing. Right now, everyone in their team knew of each other's abilities. However, CIA knew nothing. She didn't know that Layla was part of Pure, Quinn and Fex were a vampire, and Peter's identity. If she was to join the team, it would only slow them down. CIA then looked at each of the members. "So I'm already acquainted with the hottie and puppy eyes over there," she said, referring to both Vorton and Layla. "But what about the rest of you?" She gave them an intense stare, and it seemed like they were a very strange bunch for the young lady. Laterally, she pointed at each one of them as she continued to provide them nicknames. "Average Joe over there," pointing to Quinn. "Dead Eyes," pointing to Peter. And when she got effects, she paused slightly. As of the moment, he had turned on his charm and was trying to draw her in as much as possible. First impressions were always important to him, and he wanted to make a good one. "Go on then," Fex said. "Compliment me on my good looks." "Arrogant young master type," she said. This surprised Fex greatly. Although his charm might have not completely persuaded her, it should have had some effect, though it seemed there was none. CIA looked defeated and appeared like she didn't want to be in the group at all, not realizing that they felt the same way, especially after her words. "Well, we better get to introducing everyone then. If we have to work as a team, I guess the first thing we need to know about is everyone's abilities, right?" CIA asked. Chapter 225, Support Abilities. When the question asking about their abilities arose, everyone in the circle was a bit hesitant to answer. After all, it was an awkward question due to it being quite personal. It was as if you're revealing your weakness to another person. However, at the same time, it should be a given to know your teammates' abilities. Although, the main problem was that the school still didn't know about Quinn's ability. As for Peter, they assumed that he still had his duplication ability, the one that he most recently copied from someone else. "I don't have an ability," Quinn quickly answered, All the while he lifted up his wristwatch to show CIA that he was a level 1. After seeing this, she quickly ignored him and moved on to the next person. Quinn was fine with this, since this expedition would be quite different. The whole class would be traveling together for the Orange Portal expedition. Thus, he would have to hide his abilities to the rest of the class. Hiding them from one more person wouldn't hurt. I already know Layla's, and most people learn about that pretty boy after the event with the second years in the assembly hall. That means I just need to know yours, CIA said as she looked towards Peter. Peter then gave CIA a rather uncordial glance, since he wasn't in a great mood. What annoyed him wasn't CIA's attitude towards him, but her disregard for Quinn, his master. I can show you firsthand if you want, Peter said, raising his fist. Peter, Quinn snapped. So Peter immediately put his fist down and went back to his master's side. What the hell was that all about? CIA asked in bewilderment. She knew her teasing could piss off some people at times. Hence, because of this, she was usually quite cold at gauging people's snapping points and when to stop. Still, Peter's outburst seemed a little abrupt to her. Don't you think you should tell us your ability first before asking for ours? Warden questioned. Well, my ability will be a little hard to explain, so why don't I just show you? CIA looked at all the people in the group. At first, she would have tried using her ability against Peter. However, judging by how he acted, she didn't want to do that now. Out of all the people in the group, there seemed to be one target that stood out as the weakest. As CIA lifted her hand, smoke gradually appeared on top of her palms. The smoke was colored in the shade of blue that the skies had. It started to form a certain shape. Its body was similarly hued to the smoke. After a brief window, a pointed blade emerged on one end of the fully formed thin rod. The final product was a short spear, spanning half of CIA's height, made of animate smoke. Without warning, she looked towards her target and threw the spear. It flew through the air and managed to hit Quinn dead in the chest. The spear had permeated his body, a part of it protruding on his back. The others couldn't believe that Quinn had just been attacked right in front of their eyes. Quinn, Layla shouted, are you okay? When the spear had made contact with Quinn, he felt no pain. Although he could feel the object piercing him, it didn't seem to have inflicted any physical damages, no bruises, scratches, or holes where blood could trickle. Still, and all, there was definitely an effect. Part of his energy felt like it was being absorbed by the weapon. It was a similar feeling of when he was out in the sun, only a lot weaker. Finally, the notification sound was heard. Ding! You have been affected by Spirit Spear. All stats have been reduced by 10%. The sensation that Quinn had was just confirmed by the system message. Peter was outraged, having the urge to lash out at CIA, but suddenly he could feel an immense amount of pressure burning the side of his body. It was Quinn. What did you do to me? Quinn said, his anger evident in his voice that became a bit deeper. The others had never seen Quinn like this before, so they were stunned. Meanwhile, filled with rage, Quinn started to walk towards CIA. Right now, Quinn was unsure what CIA's skill was. All he knew was it had reduced his stats by 10%. If this was a permanent effect, then he would have lost a lot of hard work. Is this guy really a level 1? CIA thought as she looked into the anger that was swimming in Quinn's eyes. She wasn't sure if she imagined it or not, but she thought she could see the color of his eyes slowly starting to turn red. Hey Quinn, relax, Fex said as he jumped in between the two of them before Quinn could even act. He then leaned forward and whispered to Quinn, making sure his body and head was blocking CIA from seeing him. Quinn, your eyes, they're red. You need to control your anger and calm down, Fex advised. However, as Quinn thought about how hard he had worked to gather those stat points and them going away just like that, his anger started to boil again. Spirit Spear has worn off. Stats have returned to normal. The spear that impaled his chest slowly dissipated into thin air, and the energy seemed to return to his body. At the same time, his mind was suddenly cleared along with his anger. Hey, did you really think I would hurt you in front of all these teachers and students? It looks like I've joined a team of crazy people. So, complained. A support ability? Vorden said. CIA simply nodded as a response to Vorden's query. The reason Vorden hadn't reacted the same way as the others were was because he had seen this type of ability before. I'm guessing that it's the spirit drain ability. Am I correct? Vorden inquired further. It allows the user to form spirit weapons in their mind. When this spirit hits its target, it can either act as a buff or debuff. There are different types of spirit abilities. If this is spirit drain, then this acts a debuff on the user. I don't know the finer details about it, though. Thank you, CIA said. I knew someone on the team would have a brain. Like he said, my ability, when it hits, is able to debuff the target for 5 seconds, and then the effect wears off. The good thing about it is that the spears can also stack up. In that time frame, the more spears impaled into the target's body, the heavier the debuff. Because I'm only a level 3, though, the amount of time the spear lasts is only 3 seconds, and the distance I can throw the spear is quite short. The others didn't want to admit it, but having CIA in the team would be a great addition. Support-type abilities were greatly sought after. The problem was that they were also very unpopular. Usually, support abilities required one to work with a team. Without them, they were pretty much useless. CIA spears didn't inflict much damage to its target. It would only drain their energy and stats. Meaning, while she was using her spears, it would be best if someone else dealt with the target. For this reason, many people tend to overlook this ability whenever they're about to pick, since it was hard to be defenseless in a battlefield. Although there were the plus sides, if one was to select a support ability, it meant that they would easily be able to join a faction in the future. Anyway, it looks like this group won't amount to much. So why don't we just meet up on the day of the portal outing? There's no point training together within the 2 days left prior to the expedition. But, ahead of arguing her case, Quinn interrupted Layla's speech. I agree. Why don't we all do our own thing before the portal outing? It's been a tiring week, and I think some of us can do with some rest. Quinn said. Before the others could even say anything, CIA was already walking off. The assembly had ended, and students were told that, until the portal outing, they would have the next 2 days off. This was to make up for the weekend that they would, most often than not, utilize to rest. The idea was also to allow the students to focus on teamwork. It was a free period. Still, the teachers encouraged the students to ask them for help and guidance. Nevertheless, Quinn had his own ideas and plans ahead of the expedition. While everyone was busy doing their own business, Quinn had arrived at the VR gaming room. With the nano stick that had been given to him, he no longer needed to bug Logan. Accordingly, he headed to his room in order to use the private servers. Now let's see what you got. Tutorial video for Skill Phantom Hit has begun. Chapter 226 Phantom Punch. The VR room was the best place to practice, and now that he also had access to Logan's private server, it meant Quinn could also practice his shadow abilities freely. If there was no way for him to get blood at the moment, then that meant he would just have to focus on learning more skills. The first thing Quinn was going to do was have a look at the new tutorial video he had unlocked after learning the vampire martial arts. Phantom Punch Tutorial was the name of the video. It made sense that the new skill was somehow related to a punch, since the vampire martial art mainly focused on using hands. Hello there, the blonde man in a cheery voice said in the video. Once again, the blonde man was in a martial arts hall with wooden floors and such. Quinn started to think about just where the place was located. Was it on Earth, like the system AI said, or maybe another place? Still, the mystery also remained just who this blonde man was. If only Quinn was able to trust Fex enough. He would try to find a way to show what the blonde man looked like to Fex. Maybe he would have an answer. It seems you're progressing quite well. Unfortunately, my talents never really seemed to fit in well with the vampire martial arts, and I thought you too might stray from this path. But just in case, I decided to include this video if the user ever decided to learn it. In my opinion, this is one of the most useful skills to have. But just a little warning, this skill seems to work better with beings with a high level of intelligence, namely humanoid creatures. When testing this against a beast, it has little to no effect. Sharing this disappointed Quinn a little. He was just about to go on an orange portal outing where there were plenty of beasts. Still, the skill would be useful. Dalki, vampires, and humans all fell into the humanoid category, and lately, It seemed like Quinn was going to be attacked by them a lot more than beasts these days. To perform this skill based on the system, stats you will need at least 15 points of agility and 10 points of charm. These are the minimum requirements. Now, as you increase your points into charm and agility, this skill will work even better. This is a skill that instead of evolving by using it more and more, it evolves with your stats. This sounded a little confusing at first, but Quinn felt like he understood. After using the blood swipe multiple times, it had eventually evolved. This was the same with blood spray and also the shadow skills. It seemed like whatever skills were related to the charm stat would evolve or become more powerful as the stat related was increased, such as his daze and influence skills. This skill will be a tricky one to show, so you will have to listen to my explanation very carefully. The blonde man said. The man then brought out a human mannequin that appeared to be made of foam. He blasted out, throwing his fist, just touching the mannequin ever so slightly. The set of moves and punches he had used were the same that he and Fex had learned. Now, I'm going to chat a little bit just for the video and show you how the skill would look. The blonde man took a deep breath and then suddenly threw out a punch lightning fast towards the head. It was a perfect hit. Bang! The sound of the impact was heard, but when looking at the video, there was no such mark on the mannequin head. When taking a closer look, instead of a marking on the head, there was a fist mark on the body instead. But I was sure I saw him aim for the head. What did he hit the body? Quinn thought. As I said before, this is just a demonstration of what the skill looks like and not me actually using the skill. This is the phantom punch. While in a fight, you will aim your punch in a certain direction to start. Before the first movement is made, your charm skill will take slight control of the user's mind. To them, an image will appear and make it look like the punch has continued heading in the initial direction. But in actual fact, this will be a phantom punch while the user is dodging or trying to block it. The real blow will come from somewhere else. This skill works even better if you have high enough agility. You will be able to perform several phantom punches at once, confusing your opponent. But be careful, just like with daze, it has a chance of not working well. This is why I recommend you increase your charm points when possible. What I just did was not the real phantom punch. Instead, I decided to just change the direction of my punch at such a speed that the video was unable to capture it. I'm pretty amazing, right? After hearing this line, it reminded Quinn a little bit of Fex. He was starting to think whether all vampires were really like this. Arrogant and big-headed. The phantom punch can only be used against real opponents, so there's no way for me to show just you through the video. After the initial video explanation was over, as usual, there were a few more videos which broke down the action slowly bit by bit. Quinn began to watch the videos. The first video explained the feeling when using the charm ability on your opponent. He explained it saying it should feel similar to when Quinn would use the daze skill. He should gather that feeling again and try to focus it through his eyes. Then using his strong will and the image in his head, he would be able to project a fist outward. This, in turn, would allow the opponent to see the same thing. The next set of videos explained the hard part. It was combining the two together. After hearing the explanation, Quinn didn't think it would be too hard. But just practicing it, not using it against an opponent, he found out it was extremely difficult. It was similar to someone learning the piano. One part of the brain needed to focus and do a certain action, while the other part needed to do a different action. The problem was it was the same arm that was meant to be doing the action. If he projected thoughts to target the head and tried punching below, as soon as he thought too much about hitting the head, his fist would automatically hit upward. Still, Quinn wasn't the type to give up. If there was one thing he was good at, it was the fact that he was able to repeat an action again and again. He never got bored of doing the same thing over. As he repeated the move several times, he slowly started to be able to separate his thoughts and actions into two separate things. He had now lost count of how many punches he had performed. The good thing, though, was he didn't feel tired at all because of the game. However, it did have a huge impact on his mind. He didn't know whether it was because he was in the game or trying to split his thought into two, but he would often get headaches as he pictured himself using the charm ability and forcing the energy outward from his eyes. Surprisingly, though, in the middle of him practicing, a notification screen popped up, and not one he was expecting. Your dedication has paid off. You have pushed your charm skill to the limit several times. Charm stat 1. Charm, 13. It was the first time a stat point had increased without him leveling up or consuming blood. The system was clear. That was the fact that Quinn had continually pushed himself when trying to learn the skill. However, this was a bigger deal than he thought. Maybe there was another way to increase his stats. If the others worked in the same way, if Quinn went out and constantly ran until he tired himself out, would his stamina increase? And was this the same for other stats? What if he continually lifted weights? Would his strength increase as well? The only problem with this method would be, of course, time. It was a lot easier to take a blood sample of someone and increase his strength this way. In a situation like the one he was currently in now, where he couldn't do that, maybe it was a good idea to look into it. Quinn had done enough practice for now, and he felt like he had done as much as he could. And yet, he still didn't have the skill in his system, like the flash step and hammer strike. There were certain combination skills that didn't appear in the system, like blood hammer and using blood swipe with a shadow. But he felt like, because this was a skill being taught by the system, it would have shown up like the others before it. Right now, there was only one thing he could do. Just as the system had said, if he wanted to practice and learn how to use it, he would need to use it on a real opponent. Switching servers. Blood Evolver is online. Matchmaking in progress. Opponent found. Let's do this. Chapter 2, 27, Perfecting a Skill. There were quite a lot of people in the world that had an interest in technologies. If one could not make it in the world using their abilities, the only real avenue and sector that had a lot of potential that anyone with enough effort and determination could tap into was the realm of research and technology. There were myriads of abilities that could help you work better in this field, but nothing could compare to the greatness of the human mind when it came to creative thinking, engineering, which led to the creation of these fields. Unfortunately for Nate, he was not one of these people, but knew quite a lot of people that knew something about the field. Nate had gotten one of these said people to set up a system where whenever the Blood Evolver was online, he would be pinged on the school's watch. Recently, he had also added the new user Zombie P to that list as well. He was unable to see the person's game last time, but now he didn't want to miss out on them. While Nate was relaxing with his best friend Sam, as usual, he received a ping. Immediately, with no questions asked, Nate started to head off towards the capsule. Right now, both he and Sam were watching their favorite contender. "Hey, I think you're starting to border on being obsessed with this guy," Sam said in a concerning voice. "It's just this person's growth never seems to slow down. I've grown myself over time, but I'm just wondering where his limits are." Nate explained. Quinn had been matched up with another level 4 user, but unlike the ones he fought against previously. This user was also wearing beast gear around his chest. Since the first expedition had already happened with each of the military bases, it was expected that players of the game would now more likely have at least some level of beast gear. The match had begun, and Quinn did his usual routine of rushing forward and fighting head-on. Oftentimes, he would be the aggressor in fights, causing the enemy to slightly panic in the middle of the battle, and this time was no different. Seeing a target running towards him, the users paced both of his hands together and shoot out a hydro pump of water. The stream of water was strong and fast, but still, due to the distance, Quinn could easily avoid it, but instead of outright avoiding the attack. He waited till the last second and preformed the flash step to avoid the attack. The water user, seeing this, changed his attack slightly. Instead of a large stream of powerful water, he decided to shoot out smaller, fast streams of water that came out like bullets. Once again, though, Quinn used the flash step to avoid the next set of shots. Quinn only had enough stamina to perform 3 flash steps in one game, so he had already used up over half his strength and his body was tied. Still, he continued moving, and then before the user could use his water bullets again, Quinn preformed his 3rd flash step, appearing behind the user. As he turned his head around, Quinn made sure to look at him in the eyes. Just as the video tutorial had said, he activated his charm the same way when he used the day's skill. Now all he needed to do was project the thought strongly, using his mind of aiming to punch the head, while the real punch would come from below. Everything was going perfect so far, and he could really imagine hitting the person in the head, Then his fist made contact, but instead of receiving feedback from hitting the body, the punch had been blocked with the other user's hand, which was guarding his face. No, I thought I did it perfectly. Why did my attack go for the head? Quinn thought. Quinn had thought he had perfected the phantom punch already, but using it with no opponent and using it against a real opponent were two different things. With the pressure to perform perfectly and with the enemy standing in front of him, his concentration lagged at some point, so his attack failed. With one of his other hands, the water user blasted a stream, hitting Quinn right in the stomach and sending him onto the floor. Due to his usage of Flash Step multiple times in the fight, he was tired and his movements were a little sluggish. It also seemed like the beast equipment had given his opponent some extra strength. A blow from Quinn was more powerful than from a normal person, yet he was able to block it perfectly. Quickly getting up from the floor, Quinn tried to attack again, but unfortunately the result was the same and Quinn ended up on the floor once more. What is he doing? Nate said. Why isn't he using his red aura skills? Or the hammer strike? Why did he waste all his energy using that fancy footwork at the beginning? Even then, why a punch to the head without using any feints or tricks to confuse the enemy? Nate was thoroughly confused as to why the person he had watched improving each time he played a match and fought against someone had seemingly no progress at all in this fight. In fact, he seemed to be suffering a setback. Eventually, the match had ended, and Quinn had unsurprisingly lost. Nate was speechless. He thought he was the only person who had beaten the Blood Evolver before, and the one he knew now was a lot stronger than before. Nate wanted him to remain undefeated until their rematch. If the Blood Evolver had lost in a grand duel or something, he wouldn't be so upset, but he had lost against a simple level 4 water user. During the match, though, just like when Quinn was practicing, he felt like he had felt something nearing the end of the battle. Matchmaking is in progress. Once again, Quinn went into the next match. Nate stayed and watched carefully, but it seemed to be nearly an exact copy of the last game. After watching 4 matches, the Blood Evolver had lost 4 times in a row. Nate wasn't the only one who had been watching Quinn's matches. There were a few others who had become fans as well, and they were nearly just as disappointed as him with the results they were seeing right now. Does this mean that he was really just a hacker? A spectator said, I guess so. They probably patched the game so he can't use his red aura skills anymore. Without them, it's clear that he's just average when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. Another one commented, this was the logical conclusion the others had come to. No one would usually lose a match without giving it everything they got, and in the last 4 games, Quinn didn't use a single skill other than the Flash Step and the failed Phantom Punch. Come on, Nate, let's go. We need to practice, man. We're just wasting time here. Sam said, you go ahead. I'll catch up and head offline when he goes offline. Sam could see the disappointment on Nate's face. It was as if he had just watched his favorite superhero lose to a villain in a fight. The only thing he could do now was to give him some space. After losing 5 matches in a row, the only person that kept on watching Blood Evolver's matches was Nate. He didn't know why, but he felt that there has to be a reason for all the strange actions that Blood Evolver did in the past matches. The reason for his thinking was the fact that Quinn had lost every game doing the same thing. Only an idiot would do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Even if he was now unable to use the red aura anymore, it didn't make any sense. As the next match started, Quinn now looked more confident than he did before. He knew he was incredibly close. His opponent was a female. The ability, for now, was unknown as the inspect skill didn't work in-game. Quinn rushed forward as usual, but this time no attacks were aimed at him. When this happened, it usually meant the person he was going up against had a transformation or hardening ability. The perfect opponent for the Phantom Strike. Quinn lifted his fist and aimed for the woman's head. As she saw the punch, a large spike appeared from her face. If Quinn was to carry on moving forward, then the spike would go right through his hand. She could see the punch continuing forward and going through the spike. A smile appeared on her face, but suddenly, she felt pain on her stomach as she keeled over. Phantom Punch skill successfully learned. The fist hadn't hit her head, but struck her stomach instead. This time, Quinn went for a blow to the stomach. A spike was formed where the punch would make contact, but then sharp pain assaulted the woman on the side of her head. Quinn continued using the phantom punch in this fashion, successfully landing hit after hit while on the outside. Nate, who was watching the entire thing, was deeply confused. All he could see was Quinn's opponent forming spikes and blocking the attacks in the wrong places. It was clear where the punches were coming from, so why was she constantly blocking in the wrong place? The match had finally ended, and Quinn had been declared the winner, but Nate was still none the wiser. However, after watching the Blood Evolver's next 3 games, and each one of them coming out in a victory in the same fashion, goosebumps started to appear all over his body. The hairs on his forearms were now standing up. He still didn't understand what was going on, but it was painfully obvious that all of these was done on purpose. Who is this monster? Chapter 228, Upgrading the Shadow. Once the system had confirmed to Quinn that he had learned Phantom Punch, everything got a lot easier from then onwards. Instead of concentrating on the feeling like he did before, now all he had to do was think about the skill, and his mind would automatically do the work for him. It was one of the other perks of having the system. No longer would he fail sometimes when trying to create the punch. It would now work 100% of the time. This was the same as when he learned the Crescent Blood Kick as well. This didn't mean it would work successfully on his opponent 100% of the time, though. It was just that he was now able to perform the skill successfully every time. In the next matches Quinn played, while using the skill, he had learned quite a bit about how the skill worked. Just like the system had said, there were some opponents the skill was less effective against. Quinn couldn't figure out why, as it didn't. T seemed to be linked with the user's ability level. Most likely it was more to do with their mental ability. For some of the opponents he faced, it seemed like they were only partly tricked. On their end, they would see the Phantom Punch, but it would disappear before it would make contact. While for those with weaker minds, it felt like they could actually feel the Phantom Punch hitting them. Still, even a slight phantom image gave Quinn a huge advantage. The constant use of the punches, on top of his speed, made his opponents feel like they were fighting against someone with extra hands. He now understood why the blonde man had said the skill would improve as he improved both his agility stat, along with his charm stat. 18400 EXP. After defeating the 5 opponents, Quinn had obtained 10 experience points from each of them. It wasn't his goal, but a bonus along the way of learning the new skill. He also continued to get the 10 points for completing his daily quests, drinking the 2 liters of water daily, along with avoiding the sun for 8 hours. But still, out of everything so far, the quickest way to level up was defeating beasts. Quinn would definitely need to use this to his advantage when fighting on the other planet. There was also the chance for him to level up even quicker, since the system had stated that when fighting along with Peter, he would gain the experience of Peter's kills as well. With the hours of practice and the many matches Quinn had played, he didn't realize the time, and the VR pod machines had been shut off. They usually turned off an hour before the curfew time, and the disconnection of him from the game was a clear sign. As Quinn headed back to his room, and with 1 day remaining before the portal outing, he started to think what would be the next best step on trying to get stronger. In his mind, Quinn split up his skills into 4 different categories. He had his blood abilities, such as Blood Swipe, Blood Spray, Blood Bank, and so on. These skills could be upgraded by using them multiple times. He then had his charm skills: Daze, Influence, and now Phantom Punch. The next section he counted was his fighting skills, such as Flash Step, Hammer Strike, as well as Blood Hammer and Phantom Punch, although the last 2 skills were a combination of the other sections. Finally, though, were his ability skills, the Shadow skills. After looking at all his different skills, Quinn decided to focus on the Shadow skills. There were currently still 4 Shadow skills grayed out in the system that required him to use skill points to unlock. The only way Quinn knew of to get skill points was to upgrade the level of his current Shadow skills. To do this, it worked the same way as his blood skills. The more he used them, eventually it would level up. This was the best option for Quinn while in the game. The next day had arrived, and, as the group agreed, everyone was currently doing their own thing. Everyone was kind of pleased that they had decided to do this. At first, Quinn was a little bit worried about Peter. But when he asked what Peter was planning to do, Peter was already heading off to Logan's room with a bunch of sandwiches held in his arms. It seemed like the two were getting on well enough that Quinn no longer needed to use his blood. While heading to the game room, he noticed Fex had decided to come along as well. There wasn't much for him to do in the game after all. When Quinn entered the game, he decided to watch a couple of Fex's matches. It came to surprise that Fex seemed was playing online rather than using the private server. Because just like Quinn, they were both unable to use their abilities inside the game. After watching a couple of games, he could see that Fex was able to beat his opponents without using his blood skills or string abilities. He purely used his body and martial arts to overpower his opponents. During the second match, Fex had met someone quite skillfully, and for the second time, Quinn had seen him use an improvement of the martial arts that were taught to him. The first time was during the match against Leo. Seeing this just reminded Quinn again that he needed to get stronger. Quinn backed out of the game and joined the private server where he was able to use his shadow abilities freely. Shadow Void. The first thing Quinn activated was Shadow Void. Soon, the room, instead of white, was now covered in purple, shifting shadows above. Quinn planned to level up his level 1 shadow skills first. Since they were lower levels, they would take less use to level up. Currently, the shadow skills that were level 1 were Shadow Control and Shadow Void. For each level up of a skill, Quinn gained 10 stat points. Right now, he was aiming for the skill in his system that cost the most amount of skill points. The skill known as Shadow Eater, costing a total of 50 points. He repeated the process of activating the skills as many times as he could, and due to it being in the game and the lobby, he didn't run out of MC points. Eventually, Shadow Void leveled up to level 2. Quinn could now decide how big the Shadow Void created was, and depending on its size, it would either cost far more or far fewer points. The other skills that leveled up were his Shadow Cloak, which was now level 3, along with his Shadow Equip, which was level 3 as well. The time used to cast these skills were incredibly fast, and it seemed like the Cloak skill now used more shadows to hide him, making it even harder for him to be seen by those with good perception. Unfortunately, the only skill that hadn't leveled up for him was his Shadow Control skill, the most useful and powerful skill in his arsenal. The skill allowed him to combine it with his Blood Swipe, as well as block incoming attacks. But it seemed like a skill that only had its use when used against an opponent, and unfortunately, Quinn was unable to use the shadow abilities in the game. There was some good news, though. When leveling up the skill from level 2 to level 3, the number of skill points given to him increased. Instead of 10 per level up, he was given 15, giving him a total of 30 skill points. But it still wasn't enough for him to unlock the skill Shadow Eater. The day had come to an end, and Quinn would just have to be satisfied with improving his current shadow skills and learning the Phantom Punch for now. Finally, the day had arrived. It was the weekend, and all the first-year students were told to gather inside the portal room once again. It was time to go through the orange portal. Chapter 229, Scanning for Points. Presently, the first-year students were abiding their time inside the canteen. Every one of them was seated in their groups within their classes. Meanwhile, their respective homeroom teachers were standing at the end of the long table. On this expedition, each teacher will be traveling with their group of 50 students. 2 of the generals, Faye and Leo, will be taking charge of the expedition. Only, they will be moving slightly ahead of the whole group. Soon the classes were called one by one into the portal room. Finally, Dell's class was called, so all of the students belonging in that group began to prepare their things ahead of going through the portal. Standing at the front was Dell. The portal glowing with orange light served to illuminate his figure. Although this time, Dell looked different compared to his usual self. Usually, when teaching a class, he would be wearing the standard uniform that the teachers wore. This time a uniform could hardly be seen beneath the beast gear clothing that he donned. The thing was, the armor he was wearing didn't look like beast gear at all and looked more like a mage outfit. From head to toe, it looked like he was dressed in robes, but if inspected closer, certain accessories could be seen around his wrists and legs. Furthermore, instead of a weapon, a shield was mounted on his back. Before giving his speech to the students, he decided to survey the whole group. He could feel the sweat dripping from his forehead, thinking, I can't believe that the school is really doing this. Why do we homeroom teachers have to go along with them? These kids don't even know what could possibly be on the other end. If they did, they would be just as nervous as me. All these fearful thoughts were running through Dell's head. In the past, he had done an orange portal expedition. Because of that, he was aware that the results of the expedition could turn around for the worse. It was like flipping a coin. In some places, it would be a walk in the park, while other times it would feel like they had been sent to hell. For fear of being sent inside the portal once more, he elected to become a teacher, but it seemed as if fate was toying with him. Can every group present please raise their orange scanning devices? Dell said. His voice loudly resounded within the hall. As Dell asked, the representative of each group showed themselves. For Quinn's group, it was Peter. Once again, he was in charge of carrying the group supplies, and this included the scanner. The only difference this time was that Peter actually had volunteered to help his master. It also made sense, since Peter was fairly sturdy and had a lot of strength. There were advantages, such as his unlimited stamina, so he wouldn't get exhausted that easy by carrying heavy objects. A single student raised their hand, but Dell decided to completely ignore him as he continued on with his explanation. The scanner could be used to scan almost anything: buildings, beasts, plants, water, and so on and so forth. It will try its best to break down the information it has received and display it on the screen for you. Although this is not the goal of the expedition. Dell halted his speech, heaving a sigh before resuming. His irritation was starting to get the best of him. What you students need to do is look for things on the planet which have never been scanned before, and this includes beasts. In your teams, each newly scanned object will earn you points. If another team, where the item has been scanned before, you will receive no points. Now for the most important and very crucial part. There is quite a range on these scanners before engaging in combat. It will scan every beast that is within your vision. The most useful thing about these scanners are that, even if they have never seen a beast before, it will be able to tell you what level the beast is at. After the explanation with the scanners was over, Dell went on to tell them how the expedition would work between the classes. Each class, together with their homeroom teacher, would be sent off in a certain area. When they reached their assigned space, the class would stay there for a while, allowing every one of the students to scan the area thoroughly. If they were to run into a beast with a tier higher than intermediate, they were advised to fall back and tell the teacher immediately. The homeroom teacher would then inform the generals, who would come to their aid as soon as physically possible. In total, there were 10 classes. Hence, Faye and Leo would stay in the center of these classes, so they could respond to each of their calls of distress as quickly as they could. As soon as Dell's lecture was finished, the groups began making their final preparations. While Quinn was looking around, he noticed that Logan was already tinkering around with the scanner, no doubt making adjustments in the scanner system. It wouldn't surprise Quinn if Logan was able to change the readings to allow his team to get the top score. All of a sudden, he felt a soft touch on his shoulder, interrupting his observations. "Hey, do you need one of these if we're going outside?" Fex said as he waved a strange object in front of Quinn. It looked like a flask made out of silver metal. The only difference was that on the facade of the flask, a skull that had 2 sharp fangs on the upper jaw was displayed. It was definitely a strange design for Quinn. Looking at it closely, Quinn realized that the design was utterly similar to the one that the book had, the one that had given him his powers. "What's that?" Quinn asked without really thinking about what he had just said. He was unsure whether this was common knowledge among the vampires or not. "This is a special flask that allows us to hold blood inside. If you use a normal flask, the blood would spoil in a matter of a few days. However, this one is specially used within the circle of vampires to keep blood fresh. Well, that is as long as it remained inside the flask. By the way, every vampire is given one." Fex explained. "If you're going to another planet with beasts as its main population, then it's best to bring one of these with you. We'll be gone for a week, and I don't want to be turning into a bloodsucker." After hearing those words, a specific memory came flooding back in Quinn's mind. It was related to the time when he did turn into a bloodsucker. Fex seemed to not rely on blood as much as Quinn. Perhaps it was because he was closer to the next evolution. But for Quinn, If he didn't receive blood within 2 days, he would turn into a bloodsucker. Thankfully, though, Quinn now had the blood bank. That, in a way, acted the same way as the flask. Still, even last time, Quinn had used up his blood bank in a fight, and eventually, he was starving for blood. In this occasion, there were others to rely on. Though it was unlikely that their group would be split again, there was always the chance. But if vampires were required to carry around such a flask, was the blood bank also a unique skill amongst the system, one that other vampires didn't have? It had saved him so many times in the past. If Quinn could, he would have definitely tried leveling up as fast as he could, but after many battles, it still hadn't done. So, do you have a spare one of these? Quinn asked as he eyed the flask. Of course, that's why I came over. If you didn't have the basic ring, I didn't think you would have the flask either. Fex then pulled out a similarly styled flask from the inside of his shirt and handed it straight over to Quinn. After spending some time with Fex, Quinn really couldn't say that he was a bad guy, and he seemed to be growing on him. Maybe during this trip, I can finally ask about his shadow powers? Fex thought, yet for some reason, while contemplating the matter, he felt guilt in his conscience and didn't really know why it was the case. Finally, Del had begun to call each group into the portal. As usual, each member had to hold onto each other's shoulder as they passed through the portal. Quinn's group was called up, and Vorden took the role of being in front. I'll go behind the pretty boy, CIA insisted as she grabbed onto Vorden's shoulders. Behind her was Layla, and then Quinn, Fex, and Peter at the back. The group took a step forward as they prepared for what's to come in their orange portal expedition. Chapter 230, A Jungle Out There. When going through the portal, the group made sure to hold on to the person in front of them tightly. Last time it wouldn't have been so much of a big deal if they were disconnect and let go. Although this might have caused them to split up, they were guaranteed to teleport somewhere safe in the shelter, but this time was different. Shelters were often incomplete, and sometimes not all of the spawn areas had been marked yet. So they could be chucked deep into beast territory and be all on their own. The fear could be felt in CIA's shoulders as Layla gripped on tightly, while CIA was starting to move her hands toward a certain place on Vorden's body. She inched closer and closer and went down lower. If they weren't in the middle of being warped, he would have turned around and pushed her. But even Vorden wasn't that cruel, and Ratton wasn't complaining about what was happening one bit. Finally, the distorted space was ending and a white light could be seen up ahead. When the white light vanished, a bright light entered their eyes, and they felt stunned. Their eyesight slowly started to return, and the first thing the group could see was green, lots and lots of green. More specific, giant green trees. Please step aside to allow the other students to arrive, a loud voice said as he pointed to his side. Just like last time, they had arrived in one of the areas that had been circled off. When looking at the person who had given them commands, he hardly looked any older than them. Most likely a recruit who had just graduated and decided to stay with the army. The group went over to where the man pointed, and it seemed there were other groups of students standing by the side waiting as well. There were also several soldiers checking and coordinating with them, making sure they stayed in place and didn't wander off. It's a lot better organized than our last trip, Layla said. Of course it would be, CIA replied. A green portal planet is practically safe. You would have to be a moron to be killed on one of those. But here, an orange planet can be a huge risk, so they have to be extra careful. CIA's words had rubbed a lot of the group the wrong way. They had been involved in the Dalki attack, which was devastating to them, and was a deep scar still in their minds. Although the students knew of what happened, they weren't informed on which group of students had encountered the Dalki. Many of them thought it was only Ben's group that had met them and died. While standing off to the side, Quinn was able to take a good look at the shelter they were in. The planet and the shelter itself were vastly different to the one before. First thing Quinn did was pop up his trusty umbrella to protect him from the sun, but this time, it didn't do much to make him feel better. When looking around, all that could be seen was greeny. Giant trees, bushes, vines, and even plants that Quinn had never seen before. They were now in what Quinn would call a jungle. This was why Quinn's body still felt extremely sluggish. The place was humid, hot, and sticky, and it looked like he wasn't the only one being affected, as everyone around was sweating heavily as well. When looking at Peter, though, he seemed absolutely fine. At this point, he was thinking Peter might have gotten a better class than himself. But then he started to remember Peter digging into human flesh, and he was fine with just standing on blood for now. The shelter itself was vastly different as well. In a way, it looked incomplete. Most of it seemed to be made from some type of wood and mud. Although the architecture was impressive, they had managed to build upon the large trees, incorporating them into Thier's shelter. There were stiff, large bridges made from wood and spiraling staircases that would lead you from floor to floor and tree to tree. The ground floor where they were on was mostly empty and only had certain areas that had been marked out for where the teleportation spots would take you. When looking upward, Quinn could see residential houses and some market shops, although nowhere near the amount compared to before. But the thing that surprised him the most was just how many residential houses there were in an orange portal like this one. Quinn was even able to see children playing on the bridges above. Layla could see the surprised look on Quinn's face. "This is one of the cheapest places for people to live in," Layla explained. "This is a Tier 5 city, so it doesn't have any walls to protect the citizens, and they're open for attack. The soldiers will do their best to protect them, but because this planet is still in the middle of exploration, Thier focuses aren't so much on the shelters themselves. The citizens aren't required to pay tax on an orange planet, so those who can't live on Earth and can't even make a living on a green portal planet end up here. Of course, red portal planets are just too dangerous in the first place, and only the strongest of military shelters and factions are able to survive Thier." When hearing about this from Layla, Quinn started to have strange thoughts. If it was true those that couldn't afford a place to live on Earth had no choice to be here, then why didn't Quinn end up on one of these places like these kids? When his parents had died, a government official had come over and explained to him that they would look after him until he was 16 and provide him with an apartment. So why didn't these kids get the same type of treatment? Now that he thought about it further, it was also strange when he had received the book that gave him his vampire abilities at age 10. They were so keen on trying to keep things for themselves, so why did they allow Quinn to have the book? At first, he thought it was because the book was useless, but now he was starting to have second thoughts about the whole thing. When thinking back, he really didn't know his parents all that well, and they didn't leave much behind other than the book. How did they even get the book in the first place? "System, do you know how my parents obtained the book?" Quinn asked. "I'm afraid I am not able to answer that question for you at this time. But in the future, if the right moment occurs, I will be able to answer you." It seemed like there really was a link between Quinn's parents and the book after all. However, the system wasn't willing to share this information with him. Not until he unlocked a certain condition as it explained before. As Quinn was deep in thought, he noticed that a group of travelers had arrived at the shelter. One of the higher-ups in the military went forward to greet them, and they both seemed to respect each other well. After a brief chat, the traveler handed the man something before heading off back into a part of the jungle where they had came from. "They looked kind of strong," Fex said with a grin on his face. "That's because they are," Vorden replied. "To be able to travel through a planet alone where the level of beasts are unknown with just 5 of them, they have to be confident in Thier's skills." What were they doing at the military shelter? Quinn asked. The student were now being led along to an open space, and while doing so, they could see the people from the shelter and children come out from above. They looked down on the new students, peeking over form to the bridge. All of the first-year students were once again lined up in rows with the homeroom teachers at the front, while Faye and Leo stood in the middle of all the classes. They had come to an open area of the jungle that looked to have been man-made. The trees had been rooted and dug out, and the ground flattened. Most of what they were standing on was mud. When looking ahead, they could also see several paths from the circle open area leading deeper into the jungle. "All right, everyone. Each class shall now explore a different path." Faye said, "I hope you listen to your homeroom teachers well. The scanners will not activate until your teachers say so. So don't try to get ahead of yourselves. You will continue to follow the path, and your teachers will tell you when you are in an unexplored area. Remember to always stay on your guard and have your scanners by your side. My last warning to you all, you will encounter beasts on this trip. At what level I do not know. I wish you all luck." Faye shouted. The students saluted the two sergeants before heading off down their paths. I wonder what beast we will run into, Quinn thought. Exited thinking about the experience points. Chapter 231 for Aaron. The homeroom teacher Dell had taken the lead down one of the paths. The pathway they walked on seemed quite wide and well flattened. It was clear the oath was man-made, and it looked like large vehicles would come through this way from time to time. Because the oath was originally meant for large vehicles, the students weren't bunched up going down the path in a single file, but were able to spread out and take in the scenery around them. Fex, who was walking by Quinn's side, took in a deep breath of fresh air. Now this is what I call different. He had a huge grin on his face as he continued to look around at the large greenery that surrounded them. While the two of them were walking, Quinn took this as his chance to ask him a few questions. Fex had already made up his mind that Quinn had always been on Earth, a vampire who hadn't been back home, so he thought it was only natural to show some interest. So back home, there isn't anything like this? Quinn asked, adding the word home, try to make it sound more natural. Nah, compared to Earth and these planets with all the bright colors, our home has nothing. Fex moaned. When relocating, they had decided to choose a place that was mostly dark, but they also needed an atmosphere that they could still live in. They had found the perfect place for vampires, but I don't know why, but it always felt strange to me. The words that Fex spoke just then had confirmed a few things to Quinn. The vampires were indeed no longer on Earth like they were when the blonde man was a vampire. At some point, they had relocated to a different planet. Now, Quinn was even more confused about how his parents had managed to get the book. Don't worry. If you and I ever return to the place, I'll give you a grand tour, Fex replied. So, Quinn, you asked me a question now. Let me ask you one. Where did you get your shadow ability? Hearing these words, Quinn thought back to how the system had mentioned to not tell anyone about the shadow ability, for it meant something important to the vampires. Just tell him you don't have permission to tell. That shall be enough for now. The system said. I'm afraid I don't have permission from my leader to tell you that, Quinn answered. Fex clicked his tongue and placed his hands behind his head. Figured as much, but the shadow ability is really cool. As they continued to walk down the path, they noticed that there were plenty of plants that looked strange. At the very least, they didn't resemble anything back on Earth. One plant was shaped like an S and was the same size as the human body. On it was several light blue ring-like patterns. The other students, seeing this, pulled out their scanners and tried to gather some information on it. But just like Faye had said, the scanners currently weren't working. They seemed to all be linked to a device that the homeroom teacher was using. Only when he activated his device would the other students be able to use their scanners. Although others couldn't get any information from it, someone else could. Quinn walked up to the plant to see if he could. There was one skill that he had that might just work. Inspect. Blue-ringed growth plant. A plant that can be used to greatly enhance the pleasure in the groin area for both the female and male parts. Hey, Quinn, what's up with your face, man? Warden asked, seeing that Quinn was a little red. Is it the heat? If you need a break, we can start walking at the back of the group. No, don't worry, I'm fine, Quinn replied as he quickly moved on. As they walked, Quinn decided to use his inspect skill on every new thing he could see. It was a great chance for him to try to level it up once again. There were still times when the inspect skill was unable to give him information, and while on the red portal planet, it was a lifesaver and even allowed him to get the shadow ability that was locked away in the storage unit. Quinn had tried repeatedly using the inspect skill on a basic item, such as a pen, but after about 1,000 tries and no result. It seemed that the inspect skill needed to be used on new items to be able to level up once more. The pathway the students had walked on was starting to come to an end, and now the mud had turned into thick, heavy leaves and short green plants. The students' pace had slowed down. Now, with every step they took, they had to be careful when putting their foot down. There were several roots that were hidden underneath the leaves, and once in a while a student would be caught in place. A beast! A student cried. A beast has me wrapped around the leg. The students' teammates who were nearby quickly jumped back and drew their weapons. Sorry, false alarm. It was just a tree route, the student said, chuckling away nervously. One of the students in his group slapped him on the back of the head, and they carried on moving forward. This should be a good spot, Dell said as he placed his large shield onto the floor. The area they were now in was quite open. There weren't as many trees and vines, and it was quite free, allowing them to see what was coming from all different directions. Students are to not travel more than 200 meters from this spot. If you do, your scanner will make a ping indicating they will no longer work. They'll explain. For each new plant discovered, you will receive 5 points. For each new beast discovery, 20 points. Please remember, this is not a hunting trial. There is no need for you to kill beasts. However, anything intermediate level and below, you may try your best to go against them if you wish, but any kills will not be awarded points. Still, you can keep the crystal for future use as well. Alright, your scanners are now on. At the same time, each of the scanners made a ding sound, and the students rushed off all in different directions. All apart from Quinn's group, that was. "Now, what are you doing?" CIA complained. "Let's go, don't you want a good grade?" Before was always Erin, who had been so dedicated to getting the best score, but without her here, it felt different. "Let's do this," Layla said. "Let's get to the top for Erin." Quinn liked that idea. He rushed off into a section of his own along with Peter and the rest. They had split up a bit, and when they found something interesting, they would shout out to Peter to come over and scan the item. "Over here," Layla shouted as she spotted an odd plant that resembled an octopus. Peter rushed over. Even with his bag, his speed was great. Using the scanner, he was able to see the plant, and now all he needed to do was press the red button on the scanner to start a process. But at that moment, he felt something crash into his side, causing him to fall to the ground. "PFT too slow," the student said. "That was on purpose." Layla complained, seeing that Peter was clearly barged over. The student then quickly took out his scanner and pressed the red button. After waiting a few moments, a ding sound was heard. If the plant hadn't been scanned before, and their team was successful in obtaining points, there would be a ding sound similar to a cashier being drawn. If the item had already been scanned, a big red X would appear on the scanner with an error sound instead. This meant that the plant the student had just scanned was a new discovery, and they had obtained 5 points. As Peter slowly got up from the ground, he started walking over to the student. Chapter 232, From Behind. As Peter walked over to the student, the boy carefully started to analyze just who was walking towards him. The first thing he did was look at the person's watch, noticing that he was a level 3 user. The one that had barged into Peter was also a level 3 ability user, but slightly higher, going into the 3.4 range. Meaning he not only had the power of a level 3 ability, but the skills to go with it. Still, the levels felt too close. IIF, the two were to fight, and Peter's ability was an offensive ability. There was no telling who would win or not. Because of the fierce look in Peter's eye, he immediately backed up. That was until 4 more students had arrived and were now standing by his side. There was 1 girl in the group, along with the original student and 3 boys. "Come on, P.O., let's just ignore these guys. We're just wasting our time with this trash, and we can always go and get more points," Layla said, quite loudly, so the others could hear. "You, the pretty girl, stay." The boy who had given the command was pointing at Layla. On his wrist displayed the number 5.2. Seeing this, Layla knew straight away why the boy was arrogant. Layla decided to ignore this and started to walk off while pulling Peter by his sleeve. "I said stay," the boy shouted. The distance between the two parties was around that of 15 meters. But the boy seemed to have closed the distance at an instant speed and had already made a fist aiming towards Layla. But Peter was no slowpoke himself and noticed the punch, managing to lift up his arm, blocking the attack in the dead center of his forearm, between the wrist and elbow. The boy could feel the impact and even heard the crack sound being made. Although the blow wasn't strong enough to snap the bone and pierce the skin, he knew he had fractured Peter's arm. No pain was felt, and no sound came from Peter. The boy hesitated for a moment, but then saw Peter's hand reaching out to him, before turning and running back to where he was before. Looking at Peter's arm, Layla could see it was starting to swell, but soon it would heal, so she wasn't worried about him. She was more worried about what he would do. It had been a while now, and the others had already noticed the changes in Peter's behavior. So in the end, Quinn decided to tell them all the truth, that this was due to his involvement that brought about Peter's aggressive nature. As the boy was about to say some clever remark, Quinn and the others had arrived. including both Vorden and CIA. The first thing Quinn had noticed was also Peter's arm. "Peter, who did this to you?" Quinn asked in annoyance. Just from the direction Peter was looking at, Quinn could tell which one it was. Peter wouldn't stop staring at him. "Do you think you can just hurt our teammate in the middle of an assessment?" Quinn asked. "Quinn, you know you can't fight using your full strength. Let's just leave it be," Layla said. CIA, watching the whole thing, thought Quinn was crazy. Was he really trying to have a go at the other team? Of course, it made sense that one would be angry if they were to injure a teammate, but Quinn was a level 1. What could he do? Most of the time, low levels were completely afraid of anyone above them. "I guess he will learn his place," CIA thought to herself. "Hey, Umbrella Boy, why are you the leader?" As the boy said that, he started to look at Quinn's wristwatch and started to blurt out in a laugh. "You should be down on your knees begging for me to show you mercy, boy." Quinn had a fake smile on his face, hiding the anger behind it. "Why would I beg with someone weaker than me?" At that point, the boy was too aggravated. He was already annoyed at the fact that a level 1 even tried to talk back to him. The boy used his super speed powers to launch off his feet at amazing speed, going straight for Quinn. "You should have just said sorry," CIA said, watching from behind. The speed was impressive and was even faster than Quinn at top speed, but there was one skill where speed meant nothing. He looked into the boy's eyes. Daze skill successful. Quinn had used the skill at just the right time, and the boy had stopped right in front of him. "You broke my friend's arm, so it's only right I break yours," Quinn said as he grabbed and pulled one arm forward while slamming his fist down on the forearm. Quinn had tried his best to contain his strength when dealing with the blow, but it was still too strong with his gauntlets equipped. Unlike Peter, the bone had snapped and pierced the skin on the outside. Howls of pain were heard immediately. His friends were shocked. They didn't know what happened, but it looked like the boy had stopped just in front of Quinn and let it hit him. Was he too cocky? They thought. Maybe because it was a level 1. He was trying to give Quinn a chance, not realizing he had some strength or weak ability. As soon as they saw their friend injured, though, each of them drew their weapons and prepared their ability, while Quinn's group had done the same. But Vorden wasn't too happy about the current situation. For right now, he hadn't copied any useful ability he could use. CIA was a little nervous, as well as this was the last outcome she had expected. But right now she was on Quinn's team and would help her own team out if a fight was to break out. The two groups looked like they were ready to clash, but before they even got the chance, a loud bang was heard. When they looked over in the direction of the bang, they could see that Dell had placed his large shield down, hitting it into the ground. The two groups were only around 50 meters from the outskirts of where they were before. The scream was so loud that it had caught Dell's attention, and he immediately came rushing over after checking there were no beasts around. "Enough," he shouted. "This event is about working together. Although it is a competition, this is only to encourage you to work harder rather than slack off. You're not to fight against each other." Dell then looked at the boy's arm, who had been broken. "Take him to the center. I'll try to see if there is anyone with a healing ability that can help him out. As for you guys," Dell said, pointing at Quinn and the others. He still hadn't forgotten both Vorden's and Quinn's face. They were the two students who had made him risk his life in the redo portal world for severely harming another team's teammate. "You shall be deducted 50 points for whatever total score you receive on today's assessment." "But they attacked us first," Layla complained. "I see no injuries on any of your party members," Dell replied. When they went to look at Peter, they found out it was true. Peter's arm had already healed, and it didn't look like he had even been hit. With that, the group was to take their punishment and carry on with the task. "Come on, we need to be more aggressive if we still want to come out on top while we're already at a disadvantage," Quinn said. The team nodded and got to work again. The group was 50 points behind now, which was the same as them finding 10 plants. That one argument over a single plant had cost the team a lot. But CIA tried not to smile. How could these guys be crazy enough to think that they could come back from a deficit like that? However, crazy wasn't actually bad. CIA liked crazy. Although there was still one thing she couldn't understand. It seemed like everyone in the group was listening to Quinn's orders. Not only that, but when he was being aggressive with the other team, not a single one of them had stepped in. Was it because they knew what the result was going to be? She thought, "No, it can't be. I'm probably just overthinking it. Chapter 233, Battle for Points. The battle for points was fierce as students continued to run around the area scanning every item in sight. Damn, this has been scanned already. A student complained. Yes, there's another one here. That's two now. Another yelled out. Some of the weaker groups decided to stay together as a group as they went around. Although this stopped other teams from snatching points from them, their progress was relatively slower than those who roamed alone. The stronger groups decided it would be best to split up. This way they were able to cover a wider range, while the other groups decided to do a mixture of something in between. Even though the group thought that Dell was being harsh in his punishment, it wasn't truly the case. He had planned to do something similar beforehand, but wasn't quite sure how to do it until the incident gave him an excuse. Quinn's group had an extra person, so they were at an advantage compared to others. But since there was only one scanner, it was hard to say how much extra influence an extra member could give. But after seeing Vorden and Quinn's face once more, his emotions got the better of him as a teacher, and he decided to give them quite a setback. Out of the strategies implemented by different groups, in order to catch up to the others, Quinn's group decided to do a mixture of the two. They decided that they would travel around in pairs. Quinn and Peter, Layla and Vorden, and lastly Fex and CIA. In the beginning, there was some disagreement with the pairings, but eventually they agreed on this setup. At the end of the day, it would be better for Peter to be with Quinn, and Vorden refused to team up with CIA, so that left him with Layla and Fex with CIA to make the relative strength of each group about the same. It was important for them to have one strong member with a support-type member. Although Layla and CIA could have gone together, if they were to confront a beast or a similar situation happened with Peter, there wasn't much that they could do. The group had already split up, and while everyone was off looking for some new items to discover, Quinn noticed something peculiar. There were 10 groups yet. Nearly every group had a single member that acted as a type of mule, a person designated to carry their belongings. After a closer inspection, he also noticed that these mules were people who had the lowest levels in their group. But nevertheless, they would still wander off and look around as instructed by their team. Wouldn't this be the perfect chance? Quinn thought. Right now, they weren't in school, and many of the students had separated from each other. If he was to take a sample of their blood and mind control them afterwards to forget what had happened, no one would ever know what he had done. It was basically the perfect crime in such a perfect situation. Pio, over here. Se escolted. Peter then dashed off into the direction that CIA had yelled, but Quinn didn't follow. Instead, he set his eyes on a target. A lone female student had been designated to carry her team's luggage. She seemed to be disheartened by the whole thing, and was searching through the trees and vines in a crestfallen manner. It was obvious that she didn't feel that she was doing anything substantial or that she was even a part of the team. As she bent down to look at a certain plant behind the tree, when she lifted her head again, Quinn was standing in front of her. He didn't say much because he needed to act as quickly as possible. Although they were covered by the trees and vines, there was always the off chance that someone could see him. Quinn grabbed her hand as fast as he could and made a small scratch on her palm. Her blood was now on the tip of his gauntlet. After placing it on his tongue, the system message appeared. Blood type, A+ consumed. Strength, 20. It was a little bit of a disappointment, but Quinn was hoping to obtain as much Otai blood as possible, so he could increase his charm stat. Right now, his selection was limited. He had to choose low-level students with lackluster abilities who most likely had a weak mind too. But if his charm skills eventually increased, the pool of people to choose from would also increase directly proportional to his charm skills. Influence skill activated. The girl's eyes started to glow, slightly red, showing that his skill was active. Quinn informed the girl to forget about the event that just occurred. Nothing strange has happened. To her, it would just feel as if she had forgotten what she was about to do. Before ending the spell, Quinn placed some of his saliva over the small cut, allowing it to heal instantly, before heading back towards the center as he continued his exploration. While the others were busy calling out to Peter and looking for new things, Quinn was looking around to see if he could spot any other strays that weren't with their group, and which was also in a well-hidden area, as if they were hiding their shame and embarrassment to the others due to being designated as a luggage-carrying mule. Eventually, Quinn managed to find 2 more students, and he used the same tactic as before, getting him another 2 stat points. Quinn managed to get another blood type O, increasing his charm points to 14, while also obtaining another blood type, A, increasing his strength. Faye and Leo were standing together at the starting point where all the groups had split off. They stood there silently. Leo didn't talk much, and Faye didn't really know how to speak with him. Suddenly, a beeping sound was heard from the watches of the 2, indicating that one of the teams had asked for help. "I'll get to it," Faye said as she stormed off at lightning speed in the direction of one of the paths. Faye was meant to be the first one to respond since her ability was super speed, but she felt even more obliged to act due to the awkward situation between her and Leo. Leo continued to stand there, taking in the fresh smell around him, but it was quickly disturbed as another beep reverberated from his own watch. "Another one?" Leo said. "Is this planet more dangerous than we thought? I hope there aren't any more calls," Leo said as he started to run towards a different direction from where Faye had gone. He had hoped that perhaps the teachers were only being trigger-happy, sending out a signal prematurely. It was always better for them to be on the cautious side when it came to these things. But the fact that 2 signals were sent out at the same time gave Leo some concern. The group had managed to obtain 25 points in total. They also discovered and scanned a peculiar type of rock mineral in the mix. Still, they were vastly behind the others, and their weighted points at the end of everything would be 25. What they were doing at this moment wasn't working, and they needed a change of plan. The quickest way for them to earn points would be to find beasts. But right now, there didn't seem to be any beasts in the area, as not a single group of students had encountered one just yet. But once they moved away from this area at Dell's command, which was when Quinn and his group would change their focus, the weaker groups wouldn't dare to risk it by going up against such things. Ding, ding, ding. Just then, a few meters away from Quinn, one of the scanners had made 3 dings, a sound that he hadn't heard just yet. Dell didn't even bother explaining to the students the meaning of the dings, but they soon found out what the sounds meant. The scanner pointed at what looked like a boulder that was stuck into the ground. The top part could be seen, and it had several areas of green moss growing over it. But after the student had finished scanning the unique object, he took a few steps backwards and panic was evident on his face. "A beast!" he shouted. "I found a beast!" Chapter 234, New Kill. The student's teammates had gathered around the exited student to see what he was blabbering on about, while a few others took a step back, and even Dell was watching carefully with his hand placed just above his communicator, ready to call one of the sergeants at any time. However, there were a few students who moved forward. These tended to be the stronger ones, or those that enjoy the battle aspect more than anything. Even though they would no longer obtain any points from scanning the beast, they could still kill it and obtain the beast crystal. One of the students who was moving closer turned out to be Quinn. When killing a beast for the first time, there was a special bonus the system granted him. This, though, was a beast that had never even been seen by human eyes before. Perhaps being the first person to kill such a beast would also grant him additional points. The idea that perhaps the system would reward him even further than this drove him to have a keen interest. Still, he stood a few steps away for the results everyone was waiting for. The team that had discovered the beast gathered around the scanner, which displayed basic information about the beasts, and after reading one line, there was excitement on their face. It was a basic tier beast. Keeping this secret to themselves, they immediately dashed forward. If it was an intermediate tier beast, the group might have been a little cautious, but a basic tier was easy pickings for a team of 5. Seeing the team of 5, Quinn was upset about how hesitant he had been. But he couldn't act right now in front of these people. It wasn't worth it, but maybe there was something he could do. The beast that the group were chasing looked like an ordinary boulder that was stuck into the ground. It was nearly impossible to tell the difference between the boulders that had been there while covered in moss and a beast. Even now, as the students charged towards the thing, there was no reaction from the beast, and it still looked like a boulder. Seeing this, an idea came to Quinn's mind. He ran around the side of all the students who were busily captivated by what was going on, and he entered a different part of the jungle. "What's he doing?" Fex thought as he managed to see Quinn dart off to the side. Fex, too, decided to go off and keep an eye on just what Quinn was trying to do. Come on, guys. We can't waste time just watching this thing. Let's carry on looking around, Vorden said. The other groups felt the same way, while others decided to stay and watch what a beast would look like on the planet they were on. The student leading the charge, hand turned into a brick-like substance, while the other students behind also drew their weapons and had their abilities readied. The student in the front slammed his fist into the boulder. A loud impact was heard, but there was no reaction. The ones from behind had also decided to use their attacks on the strange boulder-like beast, but the same had happened, and it seemed like the shell was nearly impossible to break. Is this thing really a beast? The student asked. I understand if it has a hard shell, but then why isn't it doing anything when I attack it? Seeing that the so-called beast was doing nothing and not wanting to waste any more time, the students continued to scan around for other things. However, there were some more students who tried to have a go at hurting the beast, hoping to get the crystal, but there was no such luck. They felt like if they took the time, they perhaps could have figured out how to deal with the beast. But to put in so much effort to only get a basic crystal in return didn't make much sense to them. While everyone else had now lost interest in the beast, Quinn had not. He had continued to go through the jungle, using his inspect skill on every boulder-type thing he could see. Most of them were just that, regular boulders, but then he had finally achieved a result. Basic tier beast, boulder snail. A beast that has an incredibly hard outer shell. The beast will only move when rain falls. Quinn had traveled quite a distance away from the others, a little too much that he was now properly out of the zone. If he was to use his team scanner, it would register that he was out of the area Dell had mentioned. Right now, he was only focused on one thing. Unaware that the others were unable to defeat the beast, Quinn thought he was under a time frame. He wanted to be the first person to kill the beast. After hearing about the description, he had an idea. Quinn stopped just in front of the boulder and readied himself. He looked around him just in case. Even though he was out of the area the students were supposed to be in, he was unsure if there might have been a stray. Doesn't look like anyone's around, Quinn said. He was unaware that he was actually being watched by Fex. Using strings as he walked between trees in the air, he made his movements almost silent, and now he was carefully watching Quinn from above. Quinn stomped his foot onto the ground, raised the energy inside him, and pulled back his arm as he let his other fist outward at the same time. He activated his skill blood spray to create his still most powerful strike. Blood hammer. If he couldn't damage the outside, then he would go for an attack that hurt the inside. As his fist hit the shell, the powerful impact caused a loud bang. It sounded like someone had shot off a bullet in the middle of the forest. When looking at the beast, there was a large crack in the boulder, and black liquid was slowly dripping out from it. Was that the hammer strike? Fex said as he watched in shock. But I thought he was a complete beginner? No, he is definitely a complete beginner. The hammer strike was an advanced move that was only usually taught to students after they understood the basics of martial arts. But after teaching Quinn, Fex decided to not teach him anything else. Yet, here he had just witnessed Quinn perform a skill beyond the basic martial arts, just like the flash step. So he really must have a teacher then. Maybe they're the one that taught him the shadow ability as well. I need to find out more. Fex thought. Basic beast has been killed. 50 EXP gained. First time killing boulder snail. Ausratus bonus XP gained. You're the first person to kill a boulder snail. 5,000 bonus EXP gained. Looks like I made it in time, Quinn said. After looking at the results of being the first person to kill such a beast, he was even happier with the decision he made. Now the loud sound that erupted from the impact of the blood hammer on the beast's shell had echoed throughout the jungle. Even the students who were 200 or so meters back could hear it, but they chose to ignore it since the sound was a distance away. It wasn't their concern, but the sound really had traveled a good distance. Within its chambers, a large figure dwelling deep inside a cave awoken. Bloodshot red eyes flared open as it began to make its move towards the sound. Chapter 235, Too High to Handle. A stab with her rapier, Faye jumped back to avoid the black blood that would spurt out from the beast. Then a quick change of her weapons that couldn't be followed by regular human eyes. She had changed to a sword. She swirled around and struck the snake-like beast from the tail up, slicing its body in half. Was that all of them? Faye said in an annoyed voice as she looked at the shy female teacher. Yes, the teacher replied as she bowed down her head in shame. After the distress call received from one of the groups, Faye came at full speed towards the area. It seemed like the students had encountered a group of intermediate tier beast. The snake-like creature hung from above the trees, and when the students had entered the area which they were meant to explore, they had dropped down. The female teacher was frightened, and before even confirming what level of beast they were, she had asked for help. When Faye arrived, she was annoyed. She could tell just from a glance that these beasts weren't above the intermediate level, and as the students, including the teacher herself, engaged in combat, she could as well. But once the distress signal was already called, it meant Faye had to check it out no matter what. And while she was here, she felt like she should quickly help the students deal with the situation. An intermediate beast could be dealt with by a group of 5, but it would still be a hard task and distract them from their goal. Looking at the teacher, Faye was about to give her a scolding. Just then, a ding sound was heard and her watch lit up again. Another one. I swear if this is the same thing, I will be having a word with all the first-year teachers when I get back. With those words said in anger, she had already left from the sight of the first-year female teacher. The teacher felt like fate was on her side, and it stopped her from getting a tough scolding as she wiped the sweat from her forehead. 5330/400 EXP. You are now level 13. 2 stat points have been gained. 4930 out of 800 EXP. You are now level 14. 2 stat points have been gained. 4130/1600 EXP. You are now level 15. 2 stat points have been gained. 2,530 divided by 3,200 E times P points. For defeating the new type of beast, Quinn had gained a bonus of 5,000 points, which had leveled him up a total of 3 times, and now he also had 6 free stat points to play with. This was the result of being the first to kill an undiscovered beast, and it was only the basic tier. So far the system had always rewarded Quinn more when killing beasts of a higher tier, although he did receive less EXP for killing a basic tier beast after evolving, similar to how he obtained no EXP form fighting low-level students. If this was to continue, as Quinn leveled up, he would have to not just look for higher-level opponents, but also higher-level beast for EXP. Did this mean at some point Quinn would no longer receive EXP? There had to be a cap to these things, and once Quinn was strong enough, he would no longer be able to obtain EXP even from the strongest of enemies. But Quinn could never imagine that happening. For now, he thought it was best if he was to keep these stat points in reserve. When consuming blood, the stat points were automatically added. The same was for the O-type blood. Quinn would have to choose there and then what the stat would go into before progressing. However, it wasn't the same when leveling up. The stat could be saved, and just underneath his status screen a number would appear displaying how many stat points he could use. If he needed to, Quinn wanted to place the stat points into his charm skill. It was more beneficial for him to increase this skill so he could get more blood in the future. But right now, there wasn't anyone else traveling on their own, and it would be hard for him to not be caught. Still, the Orange Portal Planet was a dangerous place, and Quinn didn't know when he might need to use his other stats for dangerous situations. Before leaving the area, Quinn managed to shove his hand into the small hole and crack he had made. The shell now seemed a lot softer and was easier to break. Since the beast was dead, the crystal inside was no longer powering its defensive capabilities. After swirling his hand around inside the beast, he eventually felt a solid object and pulled the crystal out. Even though it was only a basic tier crystal, Quinn was already thinking about what type of armor the crystal could be used for. It had a good defense after all, so it would be best made into either a defensive item or a piece of armor. The crystal was stored into his system inventory, away from the eyes of others. Quinn had returned to where the others were, and he could see Fex by CIA's side as well. He had managed to leave just after seeing Quinn kill the beast, and did not see what Quinn had done with the crystal after. As Quinn walked past him and went to join up with Peter, Fex did his best to look as unsuspicious as possible. He started whistling away while looking through the trees. Did you do something wrong? CIA asked. She could tell that Fex was acting strange ever since he returned. Hearing this caused Fex to jolt back a bit. No, I'm just getting bored. Why would I have anything to hide? Maybe you have something to hide, and that's why you're accusing me of having something to hide. Fex replied back. You know, that's a classic line of someone who's been caught. CIA replied as she walked off, already uninterested in whatever Fex was trying to hide. It had been over an hour now, and the group had a total of 60 points. They had finally recovered from their deficit. They were unable to see where they were as none of the groups knew each other's scores. But they had a rough idea form watching, and with the 50-point deduction, they wouldn't be surprised if they were still in the last place. Now, when students were scanning items with the scanner, it would constantly come up with an error. 15 minutes had passed, and there wasn't a single sound indicating the students had found something. The only beast that was found was the strange boulder beast as well. I guess it's time for us to move on, Dell said. A larger device was tied around his waist, which looked like a larger version of the scanner the students had. After pressing several buttons on his own scanner, a sound was heard, and suddenly, none of the students were able to scan anything at the moment. All right, students, everyone gather up in the center. It's time for us to move on to the next area, del shoutif. As the students started to walk over to Dell, loud, low sounds could be heard, and a vibration underneath felt in their feet. What is that? A student said, worried as the loud sounds were consistent. It was clear that something large was coming towards them, and it wasn't human. The loud sound started to get louder, and now the sounds of trees crashing onto the ground could be heard. Every student was looking into the direction of where the sound was coming. 2 of the trees closest to the open part of the jungle were knocked down, and now they could see what was making all that noise. The large beast stood on all fours and had a long neck. There was no fur, and it resembled something similar to a dinosaur. Even the size was something similar to what they would have imagined. The only difference was on its back. It seemed to have a large flower bud. It completely covered it from its neck to its tail. The students picked up their scanners and immediately started to scan the beast. Size wasn't always the indicator of strength. Quickly, they realized their scanners had been turned off by Dell, and they were unable to tell the level of the beast. But for Quinn, it was different. Advanced Tier Beast Florosaur. Unable to obtain further information. Chapter 236, A Teacher's Duty. Guys, we have to run, Quinn said in a serious tone. They didn't know why, but Quinn was clearly shocked after seeing the beast. Perhaps it was his vampire senses tingling, telling him this was a strong beast, Vorden thought. But it wasn't the case, for Fex stood unaware of the danger in front of them. Some vampires were able to sense how dangerous a beast was, but Fex's senses still weren't at that level yet. So to him it just looked like any other beast, only this one was a little larger. After finding out it was an advanced tier beast, Quinn didn't even think about the possibility of trying to defeat it for its experience points. Last time he had fought against an intermediate beast and almost died. There was no way for Quinn to tell how strong the intermediate beast he fought against was. Some were stronger than others, but whenever there was a jump up in the level of beast tiers, there was a definite strength difference. He didn't have confidence he could defeat it, and definitely not while hiding abilities. Even though Fex was by his side, who had supposedly killed 10 advanced tier beasts. Fex had the same problem as Quinn, where he was unable to reveal himself in front of this many people. However, if Fex honestly did know the level of the beast, even he would have been frightened. Fex, just like when Quinn faced an intermediate beast, barely made it out alive. He wasn't strong enough to easily deal with one, and definitely not while hiding his powers. The students were also frightened, mostly because of the size of the beast. When it exited from the trees, it had stopped and was now looking down at them. The beast was a little larger than a 2-floor house, while its long neck stretched out, causing a shadow to be cast over the students at the front. Seeing the beast, Dell nervously took the larger scanner from his side. His hands were shaking as he pointed it at the creature, and after a few seconds, his fears were confirmed. It was an advanced level beast. Dell was never much of a fighter, and his ability also didn't support that fact. Immediately, he started tapping away at his wristwatch, sending out a distress signal. He was unaware of how many times he had pressed the button. Dell just wanted one of the sergeants to appear in front of them now. Out of all the students, Quinn was the first to take a step away, trying to get a head start on the other students, but the sound of his steps caused the leaves to ruffle, and the creature's head turned and immediately looked at Quinn. "Maybe moving isn't a good idea," Layla said. "Yeah, while it's not being aggressive, let's not do anything," Quinn replied. Dell had felt the same way, which was why he hadn't shouted at the students to run away or retreat. The sudden movements could frighten the beasts. Most beasts were hostile towards humans, but the higher tiers seemed to have more intelligence, and some would leave humans alone. Although, that didn't stop the humans from hunting them for their crystals. Dell was hoping that the students at least knew this basic knowledge and wouldn't try attacking the beast, giving them all the best chance for survival. The bud on the beast's back slowly started to open up, revealing a pink center. Out of the pink center, 6 vines had also appeared, rising up in the air before dropping down and falling to the beast's side. The vines seemed to be alive and being controlled by the beast. Although the beast wasn't moving, the vines were stretching out from the buds, as if there was no end in sight. One of the vines had reached the student closest to the beast. The end of the vine was slightly larger and looked similar to the head of the beast itself, but was still green in color. Right now, the head of the vine was floating directly about in front of the student. His heart was beating loudly, and he now had his eyes closed, hoping that if he couldn't see the beast, it would somehow calm down his nerves. After waiting a while, and nothing happening, the student eventually opened his eyes. At that moment, the head of the vine opened up and attached itself to the students. Using both hands, he grabbed onto the vine and tried to pull as hard as he could, but it was no use. The suction and stickiness of the vine was too strong, and he couldn't break free. The vine lifted the student high up into the air and towards the beast's mouth. As it opened up its mouth, several sharp teeth could be seen, and the beast took a bite that caused nearly half of the student's body to disappear. "Everyone run. It's a hostile advanced tier beast," Dell shouted as he ran into a random part of the jungle. Most of the students decided to follow where Dell had gone. It was instinct for students when in time of need to rely on adults that were there, especially since Dell was their teacher and was meant to be there for their guidance. The beast continued to use its vines to grab the students closest, and as they screamed in pain and cried out for their teacher's help, Dell closed his eyes and tried to ignore them. "If I go back and try to save them now, we could all die. This is the right thing to do," he told himself. The students who had gotten a head start had managed to create a distance between them and the beast. The beast still hadn't moved and was busy eating the students it had managed to catch. However, while Dell was running blindly through the jungle, he was aware of a great problem. The distress signal sent from the watch was just that. It was only a signal sent to the sergeants. As stated before, the GPS tracker and other features of the watch didn't work well or not at all on other planets. Even the scanner could only work with the technology of the master scanner that Dell held. The system was designed so, when a signal was sent, the sergeants could tell which team the signal was coming from. They would then head over in that direction. If Leo or Faye was to head there now, though, they would no longer be there and would have no clue where Dell or the other students had gone. But right now they had no choice. Suddenly, the loud sound of the footsteps could be heard coming in their direction once again. The beast was on the move and had finished its snack. Quinn's group were quite fast and were just behind. Delegate Peter had picked up Layla and held her in his hands while, surprisingly, CIA was able to keep up with them. Fex and Quinn were not traveling at full speed as they made sure to stay behind Delegate, unaware that Dell had no plan. The students at the back could hear the booming footsteps getting louder and louder. In the end, the temptation got the better of them. They turned around and was caught by one of the vines. Some of the students were a bit smarter in their movements and would travel in between trees, making it harder for the beast to catch them. Still, it did nothing to slow down the main beast's body as it would continue to bulldoze its way through the trees. Then when Del Wad made it past another tree, they had finally come out to an open area. A small vertical wall with vines on could be seen, most likely the side of a mountain. Del thought about attempting to climb it, but would take some time for them to scale, and the beast would catch up with them by then. The open area was quite large. To the left and right there were 2 paths, but they were slightly slanted going uphill, and Del didn't like their chances of outrunning the beast. "We have no choice. We have to turn and fight." The 40 or so students knew the seriousness of the situation. They turned around, facing the jungle, which they had just exited from, and prepared their weapons and abilities. A few moments later, and the beast came crashing through, with T's flying off to the side. "If I want to live, I might have to fight with everything I've got," Quinn said. Chapter 237, The Power of Supper. When looking up at the beast, blood could be seen dripping from its mouth. It was even quite a shocking sight for both Fex and Quinn. They also consumed blood, but this wasn't the same. One of the students' intestines could be seen dangling from the side of the mouth of the beast, and even for them, this was too much. The vines continued to hover around the beast's side, as if they were alive like snakes, while the main body of the beast charged straight ahead into the students. Like a whip, the vines were used to knock the students closest away. It caused quite a deep cut amongst the student's body that had been hit. They felt like they could have just as easily been hit with a sword. The attack was so fast and sharp it even felt like one. Some of the students that saw their friends hurt started to rush towards them. "No, don't," they shouted. Del had propped his shield up and dug it into the ground while staying behind. His ability wasn't that great, so all he could do was stay at the back, near the mountain wall. "Healers and support-type abilities come and stay behind me. We don't want you to get hurt." Del Comandif. "Anyone who uses a beast weapon as their main attack, come closer to me now." They did as their teacher told them to. Right now, the element abilities were busy distracting the beast, aiming for the attack against the legs while other students would try their best to block the vines. The ones that had used beast weapons as their main attack had gone towards Del and could see him placing his hand on each item. "I wonder what he's doing," Quinn thought as he went over to take a closer look. "My ability allows me to double the strength and durability of any beast weapon for a limited time. We need to defeat the beast before time runs out." "Quinn, overhead," Del said. Hearing this, Quinn too lined up waiting for the teacher. Those who had their equipment improved had gone to join in the fight with the other students. There was a mixture of people. Some were scared, some felt like they had no choice but to fight, and for a few of them, they enjoyed the thrill of the fight and couldn't help themselves but join in. Quinn was the last to line up, and eventually, it got to his turn. "Boy, there's no point wasting this on you," Del said. "Will you even get in a fight? Besides, I can only use my ability so many times in a day. It will be a waste on you." These words had angered Quinn. If he wasn't going to use his vampire abilities, he thought he might be able to help out greatly just using his beast weapons. With all the students attacking the beast at once, it would be hard for them to tell where the bulk of the damage had come from. "What about you?" Quinn said. "Why are you allowed to hide back here, while the others are attacking and defending? Is this shield just for show?" "Yeah, you try to be a smart ass," Del replied. "As you can see, I'm here protecting all the students behind me." As Quinn looked at the students behind Delaware, he could see many of them with fear and shock in their faces. A few even had tears in their eyes as they saw their friends get hurt. "I have to help him," a woman cried as she went running forward, but her friend quickly pulled her back towards their group. "Don't. I know you want to try to save him, but if you get hurt, we can't save anyone." Another female replied. Out of all the students in Del's class, her ability worked more like a buff, increases the overall strength of a student, but still it would be better than leaving them out there. About 8 of the students had been attacked by the vine-like whip. It seemed like the beast had stopped eating students while there were many around attacking it. Still, the wounds on these students were quite bad, and the 2 of them were unable to move. After hearing what Del said, Quinn didn't really want to help out, but after seeing the sad look on the faces of the others, he knew he had to do something. "Pio come," Quinn shouted as he dashed off towards the fallen students on the ground. "Is he going to try to save them?" a student asked. "No, he's only a level 1. He must just be an idiot." Peter wasn't the only one that was following Quinn. Right now, on his other side, Fex was running closely behind him as well. "I'll cover you while you do whatever you want to do, but you will owe me one after this," Fex said with a wink. As the 3 boys got closer to the beast, the vine started to head towards them, slashing out at an incredible speed. The first one was towards Peter, who attempted to grab the vine, but it was just too fast. It had slipped through and sliced the palm of his hands quite deep. As usual, there was no pain, and his hand was already starting to heal. Now on the other side, another vine was coming towards them, and this time it was Fex's turn. Fex was a vampire and was unable to use his ability, just like Quinn. However, there was a clear advantage of Fex's ability over others. When using his string ability, it was almost invisible to the human eye. As the vine came towards him, spread both his hands out and slashed it downward, cutting the head of the vine right off. However, just like with Peter, the vine seemed to have an incredible recovery speed, and right now the head was starting to form out of the cut cells by Fex. When by the bleeding student's side, Quinn placed his finger into the student's blood around the chest. It was too far away for the other students to see the finer details, and everyone else was busy fighting the beast. Quickly shifting his hand into his mouth, he quickly picked up the student and rushed back to the others. A blood type consumed. Stamina 18. Quinn then repeated this process with the other students who had been hit. In total, he managed to save 5 students and at the same time consumed their blood, while the others had been flung away or were too deep fighting in the carnage for Quinn to get the chance to consume their blood. All in all, Quinn had gotten stronger. Strength 23, Agility 19, Stamina 18, Charm 16. Fex didn't let Quinn's strange habits go unnoticed. Even if he did enjoy the taste of blood greatly like some vampires did, to do so in the middle of a battle was a bit crazy. While Quinn was busy looking at his stats, and the two by his side were busy dealing with the vines, a third vine had already set its sight on Quinn. When the two had looked at each other, the vine had set its target. IT reached out as far as it could to grab onto Quinn, but he wasn't as nimble when moving backwards and could see the vine would soon catch up. Just as the vine was about to reach Quinn, its movements suddenly slowed, and Quinn was able to create a distance between the two. He looked around, seeing what possibly could have been the cause. That's when he noticed the strange ghost-like spear, half of its body inside an elephant. The spirit spear? Quinn said, confused, but when looking back, he could see CIA had decided to help out by using her spear. Chapter 238, Berserk Mode. Thanks to CIA's spear, the beast had slowed down just enough for Quinn to move out of the way, avoiding the vine whip. Fex and Peter had also now resorted to dodging after finding out the incredible growth speed of the vines. However, the fact that the beast was slowed down didn't go unnoticed. A second spear was thrown and had landed in the same spot on the beast's legs. The effect of 2 spears had stacked, and now the beast was 20% slower than it usually would have been, and also 20% weaker. The students took advantage of this temporary weakness. Their attacks were bouncing off the beast's thick hide, were now doing damage, and the vines that were troubling started to move slower. Still, the beast was strong, and even at 80% of its strength, it was able to fend off the attacks from 40 different students. CIA continued to throw her spirit spears at the beast. At most, though, she was only able to stack up 2 spears. Whenever she would throw a third spear into the beast, the first one would have already lasted for 5 seconds and disappear. Her ability was perfect for situations like this. The beast was a big target, and other than its vines, its main body wasn't too fast unless it was running in a straight line. If she was to go up against other beasts, even some intermediate beats, it might have been harder for her to use her ability, but right now, she was one of the most important people when it came to taking down this creature. If only we could make it even weaker, Del said. As that moment, a blonde boy stood by CIA's side, and in his hand, he too had a spirit spear. Looks like you have quite a good ability there, Vorden said as he threw the spear into the beast's leg. With Vorden and CIA using their sprit spears, the beast now had lost 40% of its overall strength. It was nearly half of what it used to be. The students were now doing even better than before, and even the ones whose weapons had been reinforced by Del were working. Quinn no longer felt the need for him or Fex to get involved when fighting the beast. The students that had been brought back by Quinn were getting treatment from the support students. Now that the beast's movements had slowed, they had joined the battle and went to support their teammates using buffs and other skills. The only one that remained in position with a smile on his face was Delaware. This is brilliant. It looks like these students might be able to take down an advanced beast after all. I might even get a promotion for this. Del thought about excitedly. When looking at him, Quinn felt like he could read his teacher like an open book, especially after their earlier interaction. He got the sense that Del was quite a selfish person, and he was right. Even now, although the situation had gotten better, it wasn't perfect. Students still ended up dying, but all Del could think about was himself. After a good 15 minutes of constant attacks from most of the students, other than Quinn, Fex, who decided to lay low. Even Peter and Layla were actively helping. The beast now looked heavily injured. It lifted its front 2 feet into the air and slammed them onto the ground. The mass weight of the beast caused the ground to shake around the students a little. It also served as a reminder to the other student that this beast was still plenty strong. The beast repeatedly did this action as it roared and screamed. At the same time, the vines that were coming off from the butt on its back were swinging more widely. "What is this? Have the spears worn off or something?" a student said. But when looking at the beast, the spears from Vorden and CIA still remained. They continued to attack the beast with them. Although at this point, CIA was feeling incredibly drained along with Vorden. They had been using their abilities for a while non-stop and didn't know how much longer they could last. The beast, using its long head, was now looking over back into the jungle, and the next second it started running off back from where it came. The students who were stood behind the beast rolled and dived out of the way, for fear they might get trampled on. "Should we chase it? If it's running away, doesn't that mean it's nearly dead?" a student asked. Quinn also had the same thought. If the beast was injured and the others weren't going to chase it, then maybe he could. Killing an advanced beast would gain him an enormous amount of EXP points. Nobody chased the beast. The Shoutif. Some advanced-type beasts and above have something called a berserker mode. Once injured to a certain point, if the beast feels like it's stuck in a corner, it will activate its berserker mode, sometimes increasing its strength several times. After hearing Del's explanation, Quinn had second thoughts about chasing the beast. He was reminded of the strength of the beast before the debuff from Vorden and CIA. On top of that, there were 40 students fighting it at once. If a single person was given the task to deal with the advanced beast, Quinn couldn't imagine anyone coping. All of the vines would be free to attack you along with the main body of the beast. Even if it didn't have a berserker mode, Quinn didn't like his chances of beating the beast alone. This one he would just have to let go. When the beast had re-entered the jungle, and a minute had passed without it returning, they knew that they had achieved a victory. Cheers and congratulations were shouted out between friends and classmates. They had managed to survive such an intense ordeal. Many of the students had gone up to those who had put themselves on the front line, congratulating them for being brave and attacked the beast from the beginning. This included Del, who had come over. It was no surprise. Quinn, after all, had contributed nothing to cause the beast to run away. The other students deserved the praise. But then, a female with light pink hair stepped in front of Quinn and bowed down to him. As she lifted up her head, her eyes were filled with tears. "Thank you so much for saving my friend," the pink-haired girl said. After that, she hurried off to join her teammates. The thanks should have made Quinn feel good, but it didn't. It had made Quinn feel bad instead. Originally, he had only gone out there not to save the students, but because he saw it as an opportunity to take their blood. Just like Del, his reactions were because of selfish reasons, not because he was trying to be a hero. He didn't deserve the praise. When the students had all settled down, they decided to have a minute of silence, out of respect for the students that had been lost. But they couldn't spend much time, for they were in a serious situation right now. The beast had chased the group quite a distance away from their original location. Not only that, but Del had no clue where they were or how to get back. When running away, he had headed in a random direction and didn't take note. There were no maps for the planet yet either, since the place they were in was undiscovered. "What do we do now?" a student asked Del. Leo had arrived at the camp where the distress signal had come from. Before arriving here, he had dealt with 2 more incidents from other camps. It was clear this planet was quite active with beasts. Still, It was too early to tell whether it was worthy of the decision to make it a red portal planet. If there's only a few advanced tier beasts, and they got rid of them, then it was possible for them to give the planet a green grade. For the first time, though, when arriving at the location of a distress call, there were no students around. Leo started to hunt around for clues when the sounds of large, heavy footsteps could be heard heading in his direction. "Now what do we have here?" Leo said. Chapter 239, Where Are We? The sound of the footsteps could be heard loud and clear. Leo was even able to see the energy as each foot was placed on the ground. He activated his ability a little more, and now his vision was even wider than most people could see with their own eyes. It didn't matter how many trees or obstacles were blocking his path. Whatever was heading towards him, he would be able to see it clearly, and that he did. A large flame of red energy seemed to be spiraling to his direction. The energy of the beast seemed to be getting wilder on the outside, but when looking closer and towards the core of the beast's crystal, Leo could see the energy was actually being more condensed. The flames of aura were entering the crystal while the leftovers were sparkling on the outside. This was what happened when a beast was just about to go into berserker mode. Soon the condensed energy would explode, and the power of the beast would temporarily increase. If it gets to that point, it might be a little bit inconvenient. Leo moaned as he drew out his trusty sword. There was no need for Leo to move from the spot he was in. The beast was already coming towards him, so he stood there and waited. Finally, the beast had arrived, barging itself through and knocking the trees down in its path. Unfortunately, Leo was unable to see that the beast itself was injured from the battle with the students. His ability allowed him to see the outline of the beast and the things around him, but he wasn't able to see the finer details. If the beast was nearly dead, he could tell from their aura, but this one still had plenty of life. Immediately 6 lines of red energy came whipping out at Leo. Focusing his mind, he waited until all paths of the red energy crossed each other. In that moment, he took a single swing of his blade. The 6 vines that had come out at him had all been sliced off. Leo could see that the energy was still flowing through the vines as they started to regrow, but what he was more concerned about was the energy building up in the beast's body. Ignoring the vines and looking at the head of the beast, it was quite large and a distance away. "Well, I don't want to go all the way up there," Leo said. He placed his sword in his sheath and prepared himself. When he was sure where his target was going to be, a single movement, drawing all of his energy out and pulling the blade out of the sheath as fast as he could. A line of his own energy had left the sword as it was taken out of its sheath. The line of energy was thin and white in color, but the beast had no time to react, and it had completely passed through its neck. A few moments later, and the beast's neck was starting to slide from its head and fell to the ground. Its body then shortly followed after. "I guess you can't regenerate your head," said Leo. After defeating the beast, he didn't stop for a moment, not even to extract the crystal core from its body. He didn't have much time to investigate the area before, and the beast had suddenly come out and attacked him. But during the fight, he had spotted something when looking at the beast's aura from his position. In the distance were the dead bodies of the students. They no longer produced a flame of aura, but a little leftover essence was always showing on their bodies a few hours later. Right now, the students were a priority, and if they had run into similar beasts to the one he had just faced, he feared the worst for the students. Back where the others were, just by the mountainside wall, Dell and a few of the other students were deciding what to do. Dell had called over the main helpers and the strongest ranked students on for their advice. In Dell's class, there weren't many strong students. There were a couple of level 6 students and a few level 5, but that was it for the class. Vorden was considered one of the strongest students despite his level, but he had not been invited to the group meeting that Dell was hosting. This was because Dell still bore a grudge against Vorden, and after what Quinn had said, he now hated their whole group. "Maybe we should head back where the beast came out from?" a student suggested. "If we follow the trail of broken down trees, then maybe we can find out way back." "That won't work," Dell replied. "The jungle is large, and if that beast lives here, then there are likely to be many trees and paths that have been created by the beasts and those similar to it. If we follow one of those paths, we might even be just leading ourselves to be dinner for another beast. Well, you suggest something. Another student said, their tone sharp, rather annoyed at the situation. Even they felt like so far Dell had been useless at everything. Still, Dell was a higher rank than them, not just as a teacher, but in the military as well, and they needed to show him some respect. He could also be the deciding factor on their grades. So the students bit down their tongues and moved on. But that didn't change the fact of how useless he had been. I think we should go up one of the side paths of the mountain, Dell suggested. If we go up high, then we can see the jungle from above. We should be able to see where the area we started from was, and if we can't see that, we will definitely be able to spot the shelter. It wasn't a bad idea, the others thought, but after encountering such a dangerous beast, the idea of going further into the unknown was frightening for them. Still, with the only other idea already shot down by the teacher, what choice did they have? The students were told to inform the others of the plan, as each group made sure they had their supplies and started to head out. This is so stupid, said complained. We should at least stay here for a while and wait. Maybe another group or the sergeant will come and find us. If you're lost, you're meant to stay still. Well, I think we're just climbing the mountain to see where we are, then we'll probably head back down, Layla explained. I still think we should wait a little bit before doing anything, CIA replied. Although I don't like Delaware. Vorden said, maybe for these guys staying in one place isn't a good idea. Look at their faces. Now, they're moving, and it's making them forget about what happened. They might think if they stay there, other beasts will come and attack them, maybe even the same one. But as we move, at least we are working towards our goal. Okay, pretty boy, you convinced me, CIA replied. Let's go. Chapter 240 Purple Grass. The decision was inconclusive and have for which side of the mountain they wanted to track up. There was the option of sending half the group on one side too. But after seeing how effective they were as a single unit against a powerful beast, they felt that it was best to keep everyone together in one powerful group in case something similar happened again. They started to travel up on the left side of the mountain. Dell had made the decision and was ordering the group around, but he wasn't the one that stood in front of the group. Instead, some of the stronger groups had their own individual frontliner. Dell had made some type of excuse claiming that he was the only one able to use the communicator to contact the sergeants. What if he disappeared? If that happened, then the sergeants would have no clue where they were. But this was a lie, for the sergeants didn't have a clue where Dell's class were. They only knew that they had sent out a distress signal. The scanners had been turned on. They would still record points and work as long as they were within a 200-meter radius of Delaware. Even though the scanners still provided each student with points for their team, there was no fierce competition anymore. The group decided to stay close together, and no one was venturing far away from their team or far from the whole group. While scanning new items, the scanner would still do the same, but the sense of competition was no longer there. The reason why Dell had turned the scanners back on was because they were good tools at finding out what was around them, whether there were dangerous plants or precious ores. But the primary function of the scanners for Dell was to detect beasts and their levels while those beasts were still far away from the group. If they came across another beast, and it was far too powerful for their group to handle, Dell didn't even dare to imagine the number of casualties and the number of remaining students that would be able to come back with them to the military camp. The group slowly progressed, and eventually the slope started to level out. They could still see the large wall and the ground behind them, so they found it a little strange. Usually, any mountains had a lot of ridges with leveled and inclined ground, so this mountain seemed strange. The open field was long and still very green like most of the jungle so far, with plants here and there, but there was a lot more open space. They were higher in elevation now, but they were still unable to see the top of the mountain from below. When one of the students went to the edge, they looked down, and although they could see the part of the jungle where they had made their last stand against the advanced tier beast, one of the more curious students went over to the edge and looked down. Even though they could still see the part of the jungle where they made their last stand against that beast previously, they were unable to see where they had started from the beginning nor the shelter. Depending which direction Dell had run from the camp, The only way for them to see the shelter, or where they once came from, was to climb to a high enough point so they could see the area around them in a bird's-eye view. But the slightly inclined ground they were on looked like it could go on for miles, and the only way left to get higher up the mountain was to scale it using their hands and feet. But that wouldn't be a possible option for their group. The students started to walk around to see if there were any other option to scale the mountain, or if they could see the shelter from the edges of the mountain. Maybe it's best if we just head back down. Going up the mountain might be more dangerous than roaming around down there. Layla said, I agree. But also, it doesn't look like Dell really knows what he is doing, Vorden replied. Dell was currently just standing in the middle, looking up at the mountain to his right and down the slope path for where they had come from. In the middle of their exploration, though, 3 clear and distinctive dings were suddenly heard. The students all turned to where the sound came from, as it indicated that a beast had been discovered by the scanner. When looking at the student whose scanner had gone off, it looked like there was nothing, even around him. What did you discover? Dell said as he started to walk over to the student. The student pointed at a purple blade of grass on the floor. When walking up the slope, there were patches of grass here and there. Most of the grass was green in color, but once in a while, they could see some stalks of grass colored purple. Nearly all of the students decided to ignore it, as it seemed just like an odd thing with nothing else strange about it. But when they felt boredom in their exploration, this particular student decided to give it a scan anyway to relieve some of his boredom. But to his surprise, the scanner said that he wasn't holding a plant, but a beast. When Dell snatched the scanner from the student, a dark expression appeared on his face. An intermediate beast, this little thing? How can that be possible? The purple shade of grass was the same size as all the other pieces of grass. It seemed impossible for there to be a beast crystal inside. The students were not actively looking at the grass around them, but now they noticed that there were a few single strands of purple grass every so often from the grasses surrounding them. A few drops of water from the sky started to land onto the ground and onto the faces of the students. Is it starting to rain? Layla asked. That's just great. We might have to try to find some cover. But Quinn was interested in the beast. If it was another new type, and he found a way to defeat it before anyone else, he would gain a large amount of EXP once again. He bent down and looked closer at the blade of grass. Inspect. Intermediate beast. Dumping bait beast. The top of the beast's head can often seem like a blade of grass, while most of its body remained underground. The beast cannot move, but when the rain comes it will sprout from underneath. After reading the message, the rain started to get heavier around them. Just like with the boulder snails from before, it seemed that the beast was also active in the rain. And right now, they were experiencing their first bit of rain since coming to the place. Quinn immediately started to look around him and noticed many of the students were looking at the purple blade of grass. There were nearly as many blades of grass as the students. In a way, it seemed that a small army of intermediate beasts was about to pop out from under the ground. Perhaps this would be even more troublesome than the advanced tier beasts. As a single raindrop fell on the purple shade of grass, it suddenly started to shake and the ground around started to vibrate as well. What the hell is going on here? Fex said, Guys, get away from the purple grass. Quinn shouted to his teammates. Let's head back down the slope. As Quinn said these words, a 2-meter-tall purple plant appeared behind him. Its body was as thick as a tree, and its head as wide as a car. On top of its head was the strand of grass that could barely be seen on top of the giant plant-like beast. Quinn, Layla shouted as the plant dived down. But it was too late. The large plant had swallowed Quinn whole.